If your small business is booming, you might say,
cha-ching!
But you should say,
like a good neighbor, State Farm is there.
And we'll help your growing business. Like a good neighbor, State Farm is there.
Lowe's early Black Friday deals are going fast. Don't miss up to 50% off select major appliances. Plus, up to an extra 25% off when you bundle select major appliances. And with Christmas around the corner, you're gonna need more string lights, right? Save $4 on GE LED 100-count string lights, now just $5.98. Lowe's, we help, you save. Valid through 12/3. Selection varies by location. Select locations only. While supplies last. See Lowe's.com for more details.
A warm and friendly hello! Welcome to lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peterson, now part of the VSIN Family Podcast. We've got an excellent podcast for you as we're going to be joined in segment number 2 by a good friend of ours, Ben WIlsaon, who does such amazing work here at the network. We're going to be chatting with him about what we've seen here in the first few weeks of the season, how you want to be taking a look at these sample sizes right now, perhaps diving in a little bit on teams that are hot from three, cooling down, and vice versa, how the schedule itself could sometimes warp some of these numbers as well. And then in the final segment, I'm going to get you guys picks and analysis on every game on the betting board for this college basketball Saturday as we hit some bank shots. If you have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you have one of two ways we offer those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at gunit_81. Keep in mind, letters CM, they mean does not matter. So as per usual, please do send these into the timeline. And the other way is find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated. From there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. We actually did get in a Twitter/X question. This comes from Jalen Fessler. I'm not sure what the Twitter/X handle is, but he says, "Hey Greg, long-time listener, first-time comment. I have a question for you. Do you take into account court dimensions/lines with regards to your handicap?" Because he was watching the game between Wisconsin and BYU, and he saw teams shooting from the three-point line and missing a lot. And I certainly do take into account these neutral courts and just the nooks and crannies with them. Like, we are going to have the battle for Atlantis coming up. They've got some of the hardest rooms ever, the Maui Invitational. They always have some of the softest rooms ever. That is something that is very much taken into account. Various lines on the court are not, because I'm not sure if you've ever played at your local YMCA. I was in college at UW Oshkosh. I used to play all the time on rec league courts and everything like that. There's a lot of lines out there. You have the women's line, you've got the men's line, you've got the NBA line. Guys are used to it. Like, these guys have played AAU basketball. The reason why Wisconsin was missing threes against BYU was not because there was an NBA line and a college line. It was because Wisconsin just couldn't hit a shot to save their lives. That's shown by the fact that BYU was more than comfortable being able to hit the shots. So the lines itself on the court really don't do a lot. The courts themselves are very interesting when you get like those NBA tournament courts. But that said, I'm not going to take into account too much of that. I will take into account, though, the fact that something like Wisconsin versus BYU, going back to that game, BYU was playing in the state of Utah, and Wisconsin had to travel through multiple time zones. Actually, I think it might be one time zone, because I think it's the Mountain time zone to the Central time zone, but still, Wisconsin had to travel over 1,000 miles. BYU did not. Those are the sorts of things I will be taking into account with regards to a neutral court. The lines itself, not so much. So hopefully that does answer your question, and we are powered by Better. That is BETR, and with Better, they're making sure that it's easier to get into the game than ever before. And with Better, every game is a home game for you when you go to better.app and you type in the promo code of VSINPOD, VSINPOD. All you need to do is type in that promo code and boom, you get $10 instantly. You just pick what you think a player is going to do with regards to a stat line, go over/under a specific stat, and you're all good to go for tip-off. And how about if we tip things off by taking a look at everything that we did see in college basketball on Friday, try to find some trends and try to get to know these teams a little bit better.
Games from yesterday is Greg buzzing about. Here is the rowdy recap.
And we will start with that BYU-Wisconsin game, and I'll talk about this a little bit more with Ben WIlsaon in segment number 2. Both of us are born in the state of Wisconsin. Wisconsin dump trucked by a count of 98-70, and for BYU, 14 of 34 from three-point range. Richie Saunders supplied the team with 26 points, 10 of 16 from the floor. AJ Demansa only goes 3 of 8 from the field, but goes 11 of 12 at the free throw line, 6 rebounds, 18 points, and for Wisconsin, they lose that rebound battle 44-39. They lose the turnover battle 12-8. They uncharacteristically go 17 of 26 at the free throw line. Like, everything was impacting this Wisconsin team, and That was not great, to say the least. What was solid was at the end of the night, a Presbyterian team that is dead last in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Well, they got bludgeoned by UCLA. They put up an 86 spot, 86 of 46. The final Presbyterian, they go 2 of 20 from three-point range. UCLA 6 of 12 from three. And Sky Clark, well, he was skying it in this one. 9 of 11 from the floor, 22 points. Have to love what he was able to provide for this UCLA team. They win the turnover battle 17-11 as well. They win the rebound battle 33-25. So nice clean win for a UCLA team that's had some close calls at home to begin the season. Lots of ranked teams were able to cover on this day. You had Louisville, who was right around about a 9.5 or so point favorite against Cincinnati, get the job done 74-64. Cincinnati actually held Louisville to just 28 points in the first half. Louisville goes 8 of 28 from three, but they go 24 of 28 at the free throw line. They win the rebound battle, and they add on their side Ryan Conwell and Mikael Brown Jr. Brown goes for 22 points, Conwell goes for 25, and then for Cincinnati, you did have Sean Abave, hopefully I said that correct, be able to supply 12 points, but for Cincinnati, even though the defense was rock solid, the offense still very much a work in progress for them. For Duke, they were laying nearly 40 points against Niagara, and they actually covered quite easily. They were up 47-19 at the half. 142 is the final. As for Niagara, they lose the turnover battle 17-9. They lose a rebound battle 40-20. They got 13 of 48 from the floor. And for Duke, they had on their side Cameron Boozer. You only need to play 21 minutes, 14 points off the bench. You were able to have Caden Boozer give you 11 points for this Duke team. Just utter domination as they go 17 out of 33 from three-point range. And how about utter domination from Purdue? This was impressive against a Texas Tech team that is currently ranked 86 of 56, a final. As for Texas Tech, JT Toppin chipped in their 15 points, 8 rebounds, but the backcourt was rendered useless. 8 of 34 from three-point range. For Purdue, they win the rebound battle 43-25. They go 8 of 14 from three. You had Fletcher Lawyer, Braden Smith, and CJ Cox all provide 10 points apiece, as it was Oscar Clough who was cleaning house. How about a 15 and 15 out of him? 15 points, 15 rebounds. Daniel Jacobson off the bench, 11 points, 8 rebounds. Purdue just simply took the fight to Texas Tech, and Texas Tech had absolutely no response whatsoever. And Florida took the fight to Merrimack. The Merrymen unable to hold in their 80-45 final in this one. Now, Merrimack was catching 36.5. They get within the number, so yay, verily for Merrimack. But that said, with this Florida team, they just completely took the air out of the ball in this one, and they dominated the glass 53-25. As a matter of fact, Ruben Chinyelu by himself had 21 rebounds and 14 points, and Merrimack had 25 rebounds. So, yeah, and for Florida, the three-point shooting has been a little bit hot and cold. 8 of 22 from three. Xavier Lee, 0 points in this one. He did have 3 assists, but for Merrimack, they only forced Florida into 12 turnovers, so that was a little bit of doomsday to them. But good news is, if you took the 36.5 with Merrimack, the Merrymen, well, they made things very merry. Well, Michigan State, they were very merry against Detroit. They absolutely lambasted them 84-56 the final. Now, Detroit closes about a 30-point underdog, so you were able to get there on that as well. But for Michigan State, rock solid performance. Still a work in progress with their three-point shooting, 8 of 27 from the outside, but they held Detroit to going 5 of 20 from three. Michigan State wins the turnover battle 15-12, and Jeremy Fears, well, he had no fears in this one. 11 assists, 18 points. He was able to do a nice job for that Michigan State squad, and you had yourself a really nice win for Kentucky. They restored some order, 88-46 the final, and they were laying north of 30, and they were able to cover that one. As for Loyola Maryland, 7 of 33 from three, and they had 16 turnovers and 18 made field goals. Meanwhile, for Kentucky, how about just absolutely lambasting on the glass, 56-33. They win the rebound battle, as every single starter for Kentucky was able to have double figures. And for Colin Chandler, he's actually been their top three-point shooter thus far, 3 of 6 from distance, 13 big points out of him. So Kentucky, they're able to go out there and get the job done very easily. In terms of the non-ranked teams that were in action, Yale was up 15 points on UW Green Bay, but they only win 73-67. For Yale, let go of the rope a little bit in this one, despite going 7-16 from three-point range, as they lose the turnover battle by kind of 9-8, and they actually lose the rebound battle to UW Green Bay 32-31. That is not what you want to be seeing. If you are a fan of Yale, if you're a fan of Butler, this is what you love to see. 79-72. They were able to take down South Carolina's South Kakalaki, goes 7-26 from three-point range, lose a rebound battle 48-29 as Michael Ajayi, another nice performance, 15 points, 14 rebounds, and Finley Bizjack was the top scorer for Butler in this one. He was able to supply 18 points. That was a rather pick'em game. Florida State finally plays an under, but they still did their part with the total, 98-72 all over Georgia Southern in this one. As for Florida State, 17-49 from three. Very clear what this team is going to be looking to do as Lajay Jones goes 10-21 from the floor. All 21 of those field goal attempts were threes, so he was able to supply 36 big points in this one for Florida State. They win the rebound battle 46-39, and they do a solid job on the turnover front. They win that battle by a count of 17-11 as well. For Boston College, this is going to be a long year. They lose to Davidson in the Charleston Classic, 59-49. As for this Boston College team, man, the offense is not great to say the least. 19-49 from the floor, 3 of 21 from three. They took a loss to Central Connecticut already this season, but hey, they're not the only Power Conference team that did, as Rutgers loses to Central Connecticut as a double-figure favorite. The Central Connecticut Blue Devils, so I keep saying they're tougher than a $2 steak. 67-54 as Darren Smith Jr. 21 points here for a Central Connecticut team that they go 9 of 21 from three-point range. They win the rebound battle 41-37. It's not easy to win at the rack, and Central Connecticut did so, and they did so while being able to take care of the ball. They win the turnover battle 10-7 as well, so rock solid performance out there. Rock solid from Charleston as well. They've got most of their pieces back after they began the season banged up. They take it to UMass 69-65 the final. As for UMass, they have nobody but themselves to blame for losing this one. Charleston was 24 of 29 at the free throw line. UMass 6 of 13 at the charity stripe. As for Charleston, they only go 3 of 21 from three. Connor Hickman in his return, he goes 1 of 9 from three. He only gives the team 9 points, but for Charleston as well, they won that turnover battle 15-9 to be able to get the job done out there. IU Indy games continue to be harebrained. This was a closing total of 181, and Alabama State took it to them 101-80. So whoever set that total of 181, good on you, and good on Utah State. They actually get down in this game against Tulane 40-34, and the rest of the way they outscored them 56-35, if math serves me correct, 96-75. Utah State gets the job done. They shoot 62% from the floor, 12 of 23 from three, and Tulane loses this game by 21 points despite going 15 of 30 from three-point range, as they lost the turnover battle 13-10. They lost the rebound battle 36-21. A nice performance here from MJ Collins. 21 points for Utah State, 3 of 6 from three, and Mason Fosloff, he was able to supply the team with 24 points as well, so that was rather impressive. This was rather impressive as well. Akron all over Iona, 96-75 the final. Evan Mahaffey, 16 points for Akron. Akron 9 of 21 from three, as Iona had been holding teams shooting less than 20% from three. You knew that there was going to be a little bit of regression there. Iona loses the turnover battle 17-11, so Akron looking very good here to begin the season, and this team was looking pretty darn rock solid as well. How about Virginia being able to take it to Northwestern by a count of 83-78? This was a closing line in a lot of places, right around 4.5, so lands right around there. As for Virginia, just 5 of 24 from three, but they won the rebound battle 49-25. Always a concern for Northwestern, as Northwestern did have 25 points from Jaden Reed. Arrington Page, he supplies 20 points, but Nick Martinelli, only 9 points, bit of a no-show in this one. And for Virginia, Thetis the Ritter, he has been amazing for this team. He was able to supply the team with 26 points. Nice quality win there for Virginia in a game that was cranked up tempo just a little bit more, and this was a game in which you saw the tempo be a little bit more slow in control, but Cal Baptist, they pull it out against Grambling 72-59, a nice quality cover there, and Santa Clara has slowed themselves down a little bit as well. Out there on the West Coast, they were able to get a nice 80-43 win over Louisiana. In terms of the Hall of Fame Classic, Nebraska is able to take down Kansas State 86-85, as Kansas State was down 10 points at the half. They provided a little bit of a bonsai charge late, and Kansas State very solid from three. Once again, 12 of 35 from the outside, and Nebraska only 8 of 32 from three, but off the bench, Brandon Frager, he was able to supply 16 big points for Nebraska, even up on the glass 32-32, and they do just go 12 of 20 at the free throw line, but for Nebraska, they also won the turnover battle 13-12, and they do find a way to be able to pull that one out. being able to find a way to be able to pull this one out. How about a nice quality win from New Mexico by a count of 80-78 over Mississippi State as a pretty nice size underdog in this one. A lot of places had New Mexico as about like a 6.5 point underdog, and for the Lobos, they have been very good in terms of being able to generate turnovers here to begin the season, and didn't do quite as much of that in this one. They actually lose the turnover battle 10-7, but when they couldn't create turnovers, guess what they did? They hit the boards as you had Tomislav Buzin supply 19 points and 21 rebounds. New Mexico wins the rebound battle 46-36 for Mississippi State. They cool down from 3, 9-29 from 3. Joshua Hubbard, 29 points. Jay Epps, 21 points. Nobody else is able to break into double figures, and New Mexico, behind the 21 rebounds of the international man of mystery, they find a way to be able to get the job done out there. Also being able to get the job done. How about Charleston Southern as a sizable underdog? And might be a long year for East Carolina. 77-65 the final. East Carolina was a double figure favorite, and they just got it taken to them in this game. Like, Charleston Southern was up double figures in the first half throughout, and for Charleston Southern off the bench, Bryson Blaine, he has been one of the more underrated, shall we say, mid-major guys in college basketball thus far. He was able to supply the team with 23 points, so a nice quality winner there. You didn't have as many of those big demonstrative underdog winners, but how about Evansville being able to take it to Oregon State 73-69? So they were a nice underdog winner that we did see in college basketball on Friday, and we had some very harebrainy, insane results. But that said, how about just Arkansas laying the wood to Jackson State 115-61, and Jackson State not necessarily looking great right now when you lose by over 50 points. And I recognize that Arkansas is a good team, but man, they've got to be doing a little bit of a better job of holding in there. But that said, for this Arkansas team, they had a little bit of everything working in this one, and Old Dominion had a little bit of everything working as well. 88-56. They were able to do a nice job taking it to Morgan State out there. And then how about this nice win, as you had Appalachian State just be able to pull it out against Charlotte, 65-63 the final. They were trailing. Appalachian State was for 7+ points throughout. That was a spread of 1.5, so just barely able to get within the number there. And if you're taking a look at trend-wise, what we're getting in college basketball right now, we have seen a lot that has happened here in the first few weeks, as the overs were very overwhelming to begin the season, and so were the favorites. But we have seen a complete reversal, and in college basketball on Friday, 33 unders to 29 overs, so 53% hit rate to the under. And the favorites were really able to have themselves a nice day on Friday. How about them going 36-23-3 against the spread as they entered the day on Friday, hitting well less than 50%, and they still are, but they restore a little bit of order there. Favorites hitting that now 49.6% for the season, 404, 411, and 11 against the spread. Meanwhile, the unders just barely hitting above 50% overall of the season. 411 unders, 408 overs, and if math serves me correct, I believe that we have gotten 6 or 7 pushes. So that's what we're seeing in college basketball right now, and that's what we're all getting trend-wise. Coming up next, how about if we do chat with our good friend Ben WIlsaon, how you want to be taking a look at these early sample size. This is how Wisconsin just got completely line-based on Friday and what to make out of them, and we'll talk about a few games for Saturday as well. That's up next, right here on Let's Go Seats with myself, Greg Peterson, now a part of the VSIN Family Podcast.
If your small business has a problem, you could say,
Ugh, just my luck.
but you should say,
Like a good neighbor, State Farm is there.
and we'll help get you back in business. Like a good neighbor, State Farm is there.
Are you looking to get an inside edge this college basketball season? Well, VSIN experts use CBB Analytics, the most comprehensive college basketball analytics platform in the world. See injury impact, on and off data, clutch time performance metrics, first versus second half splits, and so much more. Utilize the promo code of VSIN, that is VSIN, to get $30 off and find your betting edge over at cbbanalytics.com. That is cbbanalytics, all one word, .com. For anyone that is new to VSIN, well, I wish you a friendly hello. This is an attention to anyone that is new to VSIN because you're able to get some free stuff with our daily newsletter. It's a great way to catch up on everything that's happening in the sports betting world. It's delivered straight to your inbox every single morning. VSIN's newsletter offers picks, data, strategies for the day's betting menu, and so much more. Sign up for free today over at VSIN.com/newsletter. That's VSIN.com/newsletter, and start receiving your free newsletter tomorrow morning. That is VSIN.com/newsletter. Stay ahead of the game and bet smarter with VSIN. back here in lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peterson, now part of the VSIN family of podcasts. Always great to be joined by this man as Ben WIlsaon. He does an absolutely incredible job here at the network in terms of a lot of our live betting shows. He does a great job looking at a little bit of everything, and he does a great job on the play-by-play front of a little bit of everything as well, whether that be indoor football, college baseball, college basketball, tennis, you name it. He does it, and you're able to follow him on the old Twitter/X at his first name Ben, an underscore, last name Wilson, and then an underscore, and the number 1 altogether. And Ben, always a pleasure, my friend. Thank you so much.
Hey, absolutely, Greg. Here we are. I mean, we finally got like 3 weeks of a sample size, so to speak, which is always a great thing for us in the betting world, isn't it?
It certainly is. And just how do you react to some of these sample sizes? Because I do think that now is that time of year where you could just bank on a little bit of positivity/negativity with some of these teams. Like, obviously, you're going to have some teams that shoot it better from 3 than others, but a team like an Iona came into the day on Friday with teams shooting against them about 19% from 3-point range. You had a feeling that that was going to regress a little bit. You had a team like Kansas State, through 4 games, shooting 54% from 3, and is Kansas State going to be an above-average 3-point shooting team? Yes. Are they going to continue to shoot 54% from 3? I think we both agree no, and I find a lot of success in terms of just taking a look at those early sample size and thinking that things are going to return to the mean a little bit.
It's always something you have to consider. I also look at part of that being due to the scheduling, right? And even now, I mean, we've had a decent amount of sample size, but yet there's still a lot of teams that have played, let's say, 4 or 5 or 6 games, and maybe half of those have been against non-D1s or teams outside the top 300 in KenPom. Or you have the flip side where you've got the SWAC and MEACs of the world, who all their games are on the road against top 50, top 100 sort of teams. So the scheduling also is not really indicative of where these profiles statistically will be once we get to late February, early March. So, I mean, I think that's part of why, as much as even in a normal sense, you're always expecting just natural positive or negative regression when you have those sorts of extremes. But especially the way the college basketball scheduling is just formed in general, I think it takes that to an even further degree and makes it, I think, even more beneficial once you then get some matchups. And I always try to take advantage of that when it's teams that are kind of in the same ilk of each other, right? And the metrics might not actually match what the identities of those relative teams will be going forward. And we're about to see that, right? Because we have the Players Era, the huge tournament going on here where you're going to have a lot of like versus like matchups. And I think we will learn a lot about some of these teams who have just been beating up on cupcakes, a lot more so than we have in the coming week to week and a half.
And how much do you take a look at that with regards to a tempos perspective as well? Because I'm so glad that you bring up scheduling, and sometimes you have a team where their first 5 games come against Towson, Houston, Virginia, back when Tony Bennett was the coach. And it's like, wow, they played every single slow team in all of college basketball. That could explain why they're only averaging 55 points per game. And I think that that's big from a totals perspective as well, because I think that that could be very easily skewed, especially if you have even just one game against IU Indy that completely throws off every team that's played against them thus far this season. And I feel like we could bank on some unders with those teams.
Oh, no, absolutely. I feel like you play one game against IU Indy, you're probably stuck in like the top 30 in football all year, right? I'll give you a really good example of it on the flip side. So being based out here on the West Coast, I've done 3 Loyola Marymount games already. Their KenPom is like 310 or something like that. I mean, if you actually watch them and you look just at a raw statistical profile, you'd think, oh, all right, team that's just, super half court based. They want to slow it down, limit possessions, take a ton of threes. I can tell you from watching them and getting to know that team, that's not at all how they want to play. They want to get out in transition using their defense to turn it into offense. They don't necessarily want to rely a ton on 3-pointers. You talk about, positive and negative regression. I don't think they're going to finish the year, top 60 in both 3-point rate and 3-point percentage. If they do, that's great for them. They might have a chance of making the tournament, but that's a great example of the raw data. The raw numbers are not I wouldn't say in complete disagreement, but there is definitely a lot of conflict with what the numbers say at this time of the year and what you actually get when you watch a team like that. They're a very balanced team. I think pretty solid defensively. Just beat UC Santa Barbara on the road without Jan Vide, who's arguably their best player, in overtime the other night. But they're not doing it by limiting teams to just a handful of possessions and just having great 3-point variance. Like they want to be getting out and running. It's just the couple of the cupcakes they've played so far were just so inept to handle that that they naturally slowed things down, and they still had their way anyway. And I think you definitely see that with a lot of these teams where the tempo stuff especially is not at all an indicator of where they will be come the middle of conference season.
Yep, absolutely. And when it comes to these small sample sizes, as we know, one game can make you look really good. One game can make you look really bad. And we're doing this as we don't know what the set metrics are going to be for this team moving forward. But Ben, we're two guys out here from the great state of Wisconsin, now in lovely Las Vegas. And we are doing this quite literally minutes after Wisconsin got blowtorched by BYU 98-70. And if you had the under in that game, 11 minutes in the final minute to put that one over, that's rough to say the least, considering that game was a total blowout. But that said, what do we make out of this Wisconsin team who looked so good in those first 4 games? Like, even that non-cover against SIU Huntersville, that's a defense-oriented team that they put up 94 points against, and then they go out to the great state of Utah, which not easy to play BYU out there in the great state of Utah, but you would expect a little bit of a better effort than losing 98-70.
Even though there's so much turnover year to year in the college game, just knowing the revenge angle, you think about how great of a matchup it was in the NCAA tournament. And it kind of felt like, Wisconsin had developed into a team that was very much in sort of a like for like kind of matchup against a team like BYU, right? Just from an athleticism, run and gun, 3-point rate perspective. And I thought they were, last year in the tournament, they were outclassed trying to play that game. And only because John Tonje was just an unbelievable player did he single-handedly keep them in that game. It gave them a chance to win that game. And as we just saw, I mean, they're still clearly, I think, a ways away from being able to play that sort of style. And not that I want to sit here and go, okay, yeah, like a game in the state of Utah against a team that is really good at playing that fast tempo, spread you out, create lots of open threes on drives and kicks and stuff like that. Not to say that just means, Wisconsin won't be able to compete against teams like that going forward, but it more just leads me to believe for Greg Gard, like they just have to find, there's a lot more consistency that needs to be there from a shooting perspective. That was definitely a question mark coming into the year. I think and I think it's still fair to, give a program like that the benefit of the doubt with the way they tend to develop players and shooters in season, but it's still definitely nowhere close to a finished product. I think we can safely say that. And in a conference as tough as the Big Ten, I mean, that's the sort of thing that does tend to get exposed. So I'll be fascinated to see what the next month or so type of bounce back is from that, adjustments that are made, especially now that conference games are starting earlier and earlier than ever. It looks like we'll turn the calendar here, Greg, to December, and conference slate's pretty much upon us already.
Yeah, that is always so interesting because a lot of conferences, they've went to 20 games with regards to their conference schedules, and the Big Ten always starts up a little bit early. So you get those 2 random conference games, and then you go back into non-conference play, and then you play conference games once again. So it's a little bit up, down, all around there, but very intriguing what we're going to be seeing out of this Wisconsin team, to say the least. A few games of a really good sample size, and then not so great here on Friday. It's Ben WIlsaon, who does great work here at VSIN. He's joining me on Coast to Coast Hoops, and just in terms of a little bit more broad picture, we just mentioned Wisconsin, a little bit of the good and the bad. And there have been a few teams that throughout the first few weeks of the season have just really been able to impress you. And you take a look at them and you think, all right, maybe I didn't have the highest expectations for them, and I need to improve my opinion of them.
Yeah, so I want to go to, and I think oftentimes for bettors, looking at some of these smaller conferences is a really smart way to go. If they're not like you, Greg, they don't have the time to learn all 365 programs in and out. You can, I think, isolate and get a lot of value from some of these smaller conferences. So Sun Belt, really interesting league because I thought the quality of the league was pretty poor, all things considered last year. Troy came out of that conference and got smacked. They never really threatened to cover as a big dog, as a 14 seed against Kentucky last year. And the teams at the top, like James Madison, I think was the preseason favorite. I've been really unimpressed with how they've looked so far. They've had a couple of poor losses. Arkansas State, I'm sort of lukewarm on. Even seeing, it's funny, like Troy, I think is actually a team that most people were sleeping on because, they lost 4 of their 5 starters. They had their best player, the Sun Belt Player of the Year from last year, goes to Indiana, gets a ton of money. They lost, their 3 best defensive players as well. But I don't know, for people who haven't been paying attention to these super late night West Coast games, they beat San Diego State in double overtime, true road game at Viejas. Then they go to USC and they go to triple overtime the other night. So
should have won that game.
It's nuts, I know. I mean, watching them in person, it's not like they really wow you just with their physicality, but they are really smartly well coached. Their staff has a lot of pedigree and experience at kind of the smaller conference level. They've scheduled really tough. They've really cut their teeth, even in games where they've looked to be a little bit outclassed. To do what they did against the sort of length and physicality of San Diego State, and then to hang in there with the USC team, I'm definitely high on as a possible sleeper this year in the Big Ten, even though they're not currently at full strength as it stands here in late November. That's the sort of team I would just sort of earmark, keep an eye on, because I'm still not convinced that the Sun Belt's going to be all that good just from a night-to-night quality of play standpoint. And if you can kind of isolate a couple teams you like in conferences like that, where the metrics might not necessarily say they should be running away with games in that league or they're not a big conference favorite, I still would look at a team like that as a total play on. And they have really showed me a lot. The Campbell brothers, again, they're not that big or imposing, but they're really smart, crafty players with how they are able to attack the basket. And there's a lot of nice pieces there that I think we've seen over the last couple of days. They're on a 6-game road trip right now. There have been some lows, but these last couple of nights certainly are what, to me, show you the potential that they have. That's really what I try to do, Greg. Like all of November and December, it's just find teams like that I see against really good competition that I believe will look way better once we get into a conference play.
Absolutely. And that Sun Belt Conference as a whole, I thought was very much a toss-up coming into the season, because it feels like the Sun Belt every year is a little bit of a toss-up, but I'm right there with you with Troy. Lone concern is with a team like Troy, and I'm so glad that you bring them up, how much do you want to take a look at their scheduling spots moving forward? Because they played a double overtime game a few nights ago against San Diego State. They played a triple overtime game against USC, a game that they should have won. They lose that game to CSUN. They're a team that's dealing with a lot of travel, having to go from pretty much the southeast part of the country out to the west coast, playing a lot of these just late night games. I always fear that might take a little bit of a toll on a team like a Troy, and I think that might be a little bit tough for them to be able to bounce back in some of their next few games, because that just takes a lot out of you when you've got all those games, because they've got, I believe, on Monday an 8 o'clock a.m. Pacific, 11 o'clock a.m. Eastern time tip against a Toledo team that loves to run.
I mean, the game I saw them, they looked really flat, and that was their first game of the 6-game West Coast road trip slate. And I definitely think, that just sort of speaks to now, and especially for these mid-majors, the way they schedule, how they're going to, I think it's almost by design, right? You take your lumps, you schedule a lot of games in a short period of condensed time to try and simulate, right, what you get in these conference tournaments, especially for a league like a Sun Belt or a lot of these other mid-majors that are one-bid leagues in a sense. And we're about to get that. I'd also look at it from the flip side. There's a bunch of West Coast teams that have not left to the Pacific time zone or the state of California so far, who are about to go out to these Thanksgiving tournament games. You have Charleston, Daytona, Bahamas. Yeah, I know we have the Bahamas tournament already. Those are the spots too. Like you get these 11 a.m. noon Eastern tip times when you're making those long trips. Like outside of just learning and getting more data points on teams with limited sample sizes so far, those are the biggest things I'll look to actually bet on as we get into this Thanksgiving week of very, very bizarre, weird, kind of out there one-off scheduling spots like we're about to see. And it really impacts either, as you're talking about, the East Coast teams going west or vice versa.
Absolutely. And I think that those are such big things to be taking a look at this time of year as well, because you do get those funky spots. You do get these teams that they play, even in the case of like a Chattanooga from a few weeks ago, they had to play in La Raga, California against St. Mary's. And then the next night they played against UNLV. They lost both games. They did not cover either of those games. Those are always things that you do want to be circling as well. And with regards to what we've got on Saturday, Ben, not necessarily the biggest slate for Saturday. One of the more relaxing Saturdays I'm going to have for a very long time, because I have to prepare for these 150-game slates that we're going to be getting starting in January. So I do very much welcome this. But that said, anything that you might be taking a look at, as we've got an interesting UW Milwaukee team that's going to be playing against Wichita St. Both of us have a little bit of affinity there. We've got these neutral court games really getting starting up. Anything that's really catching your attention?
You're right. It's a very light card. I honestly haven't dove in that deep. As a result, it's funny you bring up Milwaukee. Couple of workman-like covers so far for the Panthers, getting giant point spread in their favor as big dogs on the road here. I've actually, I've liked the fight I've seen from them so far, and admittedly, it's not like I've watched a ton of their games start to finish, but that's certainly a team that I think will try to embrace that kind of smash mouth bruising style. I'd at least look at a team like that in games where you've got, big point spreads. And there's going to be a couple more for them, I would think, in non-con. It's not like it's a very talented, offensive shooting team either. But a team like that in these non-cons, it's catching over, especially high teens into the 20s. they do kind of fit the profile, and we've seen this a lot. Horizon League seems to be like a funnel for this for whatever reason, just because I think the identity of that league is cliche as it is to say, like, it is so blue collar, right? Like, and these teams are predicated on their toughness and physicality on the interior. I would continue just Milwaukee, but some of those other teams in similar spots like that, maybe with the exception of Green Bay, because I think it's still just a disaster for Doug Gottlieb and the Phoenix right now. I would look for those teams, and especially if, let's say, you're in those spots where maybe it's one of these big teams coming off of a high-profile showcase game or a tournament, something like that, to kind of catch those teams napping and at least stay in the number. That's sort of how I'm approaching a lot of those sorts of spots going forward.
Yes, I think that is so valuable to be doing, and it's going to be interesting to look at this UW Milwaukee team this year, as they were a top 5 team in terms of rebound percentage last year, but you lose Jermichael Stillwell, you lose Semis Fulks, and now you have to go up against a Wichita St team that I thought was horribly undervalued coming into the season. Nice quality cover for them a few days ago against Boise State. Now you have to go to the roundhouse, as they like to call it, so that's going to be a good one. And Ben, I know that you're doing an amazing job gauging this great sport of college basketball. Know that you've been doing a lot of work with regards to more of these WCC teams. I know that you've mentioned a little bit of Loyola Marymount. I know that you do a lot with regards to the WAC and so much more, so let the good people at home know it's on tap for you and how people can follow along on social media and other platforms.
I always appreciate it, Greg. I'm at Ben_Wilson_1. Yeah, WCC, WAC, those are kind of my conferences of focus here going forward. And gotta say, man, I mean, WCC, everybody wants to talk Gonzaga, but this conference, I think, could be a lot more fun than we would have thought coming in with how good Santa Clara looks early on. You know, St. Mary's will be there. Don't sleep on Seattle either. First year in the WCC. I'm a big fan of Chris Victor, and even though it might be a transitional time at non-con, like, there are some legit teams, and that's not even to mention, you know, the Oregon States, Wazoo's of the world. Not that those teams are necessarily all that good, but will be tough out. So, yeah, that conference is going to be really fun to watch this year.
Absolutely. And Ben, he does such an incredible job taking a look at this great game that we all know and love of college basketball, and does a great job on so many different fronts. And every single time he joins me, on such great insights. So big thanks to Ben for joining me on Coast to Coast Hoops, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. And coming up next, it is that time of the podcast. I give you picks and analysis on every game on the betting board for this college basketball Saturday, as we have some big shots.
If your small business has a problem, you could say,
Ugh, just my luck.
but you should say,
Like a good neighbor, State Farm is there.
and we'll help get you back in business. Like a good neighbor, State Farm is there.
And we're back here in lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peterson, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. Always great to be joined by Ben WIlsaon, who does such great work over here at VSiN. Every single time he joins me, he lends incredible insights. He did so once again today, and his play-by-play work really second to none, whether that be college basketball, whether that be tennis. I know he does some college baseball, indoor football, you name it, he does it. So great to be able to get him aboard. A big thanks to Ben for joining me in the last segment. Now it is that time of the podcast. I give you picks and analysis on every game on the betting board for this college basketball Saturday, as we hit some big shots.
Most financial establishments close at a certain time, but not here. It is time for a side and total on every game on today's betting board bank shots.
Do note that, as per usual, any changes that are made to these plays will be listed up on my Twitter/X feed at gunit_D1. We are going to be going in Las Vegas rotation order. This is where we go with the games involving the bigger conferences first, and then at the bottom will be the multi-team events. So that means that the Paradise Jam games, those are actually going to be at the bottom, so they'll be out of time order. And then the smaller teams, the teams in these conferences, the Patriot League, the Atlantic Sun, the MEAC, the SWAC, the Big South, the Northeast Conference. I think that I got them all. Those are going to be at the bottom. So how about if we do get things started with 601, 602 on the card, as Marquette plays those to Central Michigan. Central Michigan, an underdog of 22.5 points. Till on this game is 151, and I did set a total here of a 152. I'm going to be in on the over. For Central Michigan, I anticipate them being a little bit more of a mid-tempo team this season under Andy Brockma. Right now, they're 322nd in the country in terms of total possessions per game. He comes on over from Ferris State, so I do think that they're going to be speeding up just a skoge, and they might have a bit of a tough time with the Marquette team that has a lot of chemistry. The bad news is they didn't really bring in a lot of talent to be able to help themselves out, and it's been a rough season for them. Chase Ross has been rock solid, 20 points, 4 boards, 4 assists. There just hasn't been a lot around him. Ben Gould, Dave Lowry, Nigel James, they're all giving you about 10.5 points per game, but other than Gould, you really don't have a guy that can grab a whole bunch of rebounds for this team. For Marquette, they're shooting just below 31% from 3, which I do think that there's going to be a little bit of positivity to, but this is not a team that necessarily bombs it from 3. Now, they are once again a pretty solid turnover team. Last year, they were in the top 50 in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, and it is a Central Michigan team that they've been losing that battle. They've been turning the ball over 13.5 times themselves while only generating about 10 turnovers per game, but I do like what I've been seeing down low out of Nathan Klebut. He's a guy that has been able to supply about 11 points, 7.5 rebounds per game, comes on up to the D1 ranks along with Brockma, and then you've had Fat Brooks, who he began his career at Michigan, great name. Come in, give this team some relatively good scoring. He's been able to supply about 8 points, 3 assists per contest. They do need a little bit of cleaner offense, but Logan McIntyre, he's right now shooting about 38.5% from 3-point range. He's been able to supply this team with 9 points per game, and part of the reason why Central Michigan's tempo has been so slow has been because of the competition that they've been playing. The likes of Northern Kentucky, they play against Coppin State, Bradley, along with Appalachian State. You've got a lot of just slow teams in there. South Alabama, this should be going northward a little bit. I do think that Marquette is going to be looking to push the issue. I think that they're going to generate some turnovers, but for this Marquette team, they've been rough with regards to their 3-point shooting. This is a Central Michigan team that I think can hold up on the glass, so did set a line here of 20. I'm going to be willing to take the north of 20 points that I'm right now seeing with Central Michigan, and at a 151, I'm in on the over semi-total at a 152. 603, 604 on the card. Cleveland State is on the road against Kent State. Kent State is right now a 13.5 point favorite with a total of a 174.5. Set a line of 13. So here at 13.5 plus, I'm going to be willing to take those points with Cleveland State. Now I recognize that Cleveland State really took it on the chin against Valparaiso, and this has been a defense that has been rough to say the least. Rob Summers, he's in year number 1 after he was an assistant under Dennis Gates over at Missouri last season, but his team is right now giving up over 90 points per contest. And for Cleveland State, the big thing is they're really not generating a lot of turnovers. They're playing fast, but they're outside the top 325 in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, so they're not causing teams to be really uncomfortable. They have been, Cleveland State has, shooting about 35.5% from 3-point range. Top guys like Trey Beard, Desan Nasaya have been able to do a nice job in terms of supplying the team with combined 33 points per contest. You've been able to have Beard shoot over 48% from 3-point range. They bring in Foster Wonders from UW Green Bay, where he was a solid scorer last season. And then Josiah Harris, I think, can really be a game breaker, as he began his career over at Akron and West Virginia, was a starter last season before he got injured over at Akron, and he was supplying the team with about 8.5 points, 5 boards before going down with injury. 6'7", nice versatility. But for Kent State, they actually played against the same Cleveland State team about a week, maybe a week and a half ago. That was a game where it was a little bit closer than expected for Kent State. They did get the job done, 102-95. I think that things are going to be a little bit more tame here, as Cleveland State in that game went 15 of 36 from 3-point range. Kent State actually only shot 6 of 23 from 3, and I do think that after that game was on more of a neutral court, that things are going to be heightened a little bit more. And for Kent State, they've actually been breaking the hundreds time and time again this far this season. And for Kent State, they've always been a relatively fast team, but not necessarily playing at warp speed. Currently 19th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. I do think that that'll be coming downward just a tick, as Cleveland State, they are 69th, very nice in terms of total possessions per game. But that said, I do think that Kent State going to be able to control the board. So you've got Delreco Gillespie right now supplying 22 points, 13 rebounds. He has been rock solid. And right now for Kent State, they're shooting 37% from 3. Last year they were outside the top 3 in terms of 3-point shooting percentage. I think you get more of a mid-30s 3-point shooting percentage team. Sion Medley has always been a nice facilitator, but not much of a scorer. He's given out 6 assists per game. You've got Morgan Stafford, who he was dealing with injury last year. He's come in. He's given the team 17 points, 45.5% 3-point shooting. He's more of a career mid-30s 3-point shooter. And then you've been able to get some nice shiftiness out of Rayvon Griffith, former top 100 recruit, comes in from Cincinnati. He's been able to give this team more like 4 points per contest. So I like what he's able to bring to the table. In the end, I do think that Kent State does find a way to be able to get the job done, but this is a battle for the great state of Ohio. This is a bunch in Kent State that hasn't been quite generating the turnovers that they have in past seasons. Right now, they're allowing opponents to shoot 37% from 3. I do think that there's going to be a little bit of regularity there. I do think that Cleveland State finds their pairings just a little bit more. I'm willing to take anything above 13 with Cleveland State, set a total of a 167. I think the Cleveland State calms down with their 3-point shooting from the first time around, so in on the under and the points here with Cleveland State. State 6-5, 6-6 on the betting board. This is from Mohegan Sun. Providence and Penn State 2 battle. Penn State an underdog of 4.5 points. Total on this game between 159.5 to a 160.5. Did set a total of a 160. This opened up at a 163, but I personally would rather have a 160.5 under rather than a 159.5 over. Providence last year was well outside the top 200 in terms of total possessions per game. It is very clear that they're turning down for nobody whatsoever with regards to the tempo. Currently, in terms of total possessions per game, they're clocking in 15th in all of college basketball. I think that team's down a little bit more. This just doesn't feel like the Kim English really blueprint or style, and you got a Penn State team that has really slowed down this year. Penn State right now in terms of total possessions per game 353rd in the country. I do think that speeds up a little bit, so I do think that you get somewhere between A and B, and for Penn State, it has been a little bit of a rough start to the season in terms of this team and the boards, but they've actually done a good job of protecting the ball, despite the fact that you've got two freshmen that are really controlling things in the backcourt, Kenan Mingo and Malia Tunka. These guys have been able to combine for 31.5 points. Between the two of them, 8.6 assists per game, and this team's only turned the ball over 7.2 times per game. So even though Penn State has been playing slowly, they've done a great job in terms of winning the turnover battle. They themselves are generating about 14 turnovers per game, so they're winning the turnover battle by darn near 7 turnovers per game. But the problem is you really don't have a lot down low. There's not a single guy on the team that's giving you more than 4.8 rebounds per game. You've got a 7-footer in Ivan Juric, who comes over from the country of Croatia. He's been able to give you about 9 points per contest, so he's been a little bit helpful, but you need a little bit more there. And for Providence, I do think that they're going to be able to win this battle down low, as you've got Oswin, I can't pronounce his last name, give you over 2 blocks per contest, but I did set my line at 4 with the way that Penn State is taking care of the ball, and with the way that this is a Providence team that has really been giving it up from the outside. They're allowing opponents to shoot 36% from 3. Now, the duo of Jason Edwards and Jalen Sellers, these guys are just pumping it in there. They're combining for 37 points per contest. Both are mid-30s three-point shooters, and with Edwards, he's been able to supply about 4.6 assists per game, but neither of these guys are necessarily rock-solid defenders. You've got Ryan Malaya, who's been able to do a nice job down low, give you about 7 rebounds per game. Again, I do think the Penn State loses that battle down low, but I could only set my line at 4, even though this should be a little bit more of a Providence crowd, as this is being played out there in the great state of Connecticut. But I do think that for Penn State, they do a nice job playing a little bit more of a slow and controlled style. I think that they take care of the ball, and that allows them to hang around. I set my line at 4, so you're at a 4.5 plus. I'm going to be willing to take those points, and I am going to be in on a 168.5 or higher to the under. 607, 608 on the card. From LeBron James Arena, you've got Duquesne and Northeastern doing battle, and Duquesne a 9.5 point favorite total on this game. It is 147. Set Duquesne as an 8.5 point favorite, so I'm going to be willing to take 9 plus here with Northeastern. Now Northeastern is coming off of a game where they scored less than 60 points against Princeton, all sorts of brutality there, and for Northeastern, they are in a little bit of transition in the backcourt. You lose someone like a Masai Troutman, who had been able to run the block last few seasons. Harold Woods was really good for this unit, but I think that they can hold in there down low. I do recognize that on the other end, you've got a former just Pittsburgh standout for this team, and John Hughley, who's doing a bit of everything. 17.5 points, 6.5 boards. He's actually added a 3-point shot to his game, and then Terrence Gunyard, he comes over from UT Martin, and he has been amazing. 20.5 points, 5.8 assists, 2.2 steals on 48% 3-point shooting. And for Duquesne, they've really sped up their tempo from a season ago. Last year, this team was outside the top 300 in terms of total possessions per game. Right now for Duquesne, they're checking in 66th in all of college basketball. Meanwhile, Northeastern, they're never really a super slow team. They're never really a super fast team. Right now, they've been slowing things down just a skoge a bit more, as in terms of total possessions per game, they check in about 242nd in all of college basketball. But that said, I do think that Northeastern is going to be able to hold in there, because with Maximus Edwards, after he was a 10-plus point per game scorer 2 years ago over at George Washington, he just has never really been able to develop out of that. And then on the other end for Northeastern, I do like the way that Yuri Fritz is controlling things and has some versatility at 6'9". He's supplying the team with 17 points. He's been able to give this team right around about 7.5 boards per contest. Ellie Pratt is a main scorer from a season ago. Now, Pratt has been dealing with a little bit of injury, so that's something that you do want to be noting. Pratt, with regards to that Princeton game, he was out of the fold, and I have handicapped him out of this game. Personally, he was averaging 17 points per game, so that puts much more on the plate of William Kamiri, who he began his career coming out off the bench for this team. He has seen quite a few more minutes this season after he dealt with a little bit of injury last year. When he was getting out there on the floor last year, 8 points per contest, shot 38% from 3. Right now, he's playing about 7 points per contest, so the onus is going to be falling on him a little bit more. But even with dealing with that injury to Pratt, I do think that this is a Northeastern team that does a relatively solid job of holding up defensively. We should see some positivity with the fact that they're shooting 26.8% from 3, though I don't think that they're going to be amazing with their outside shooting. I think that they're going to be built a little bit more down low, built built a little bit more around the defense, as in the top 125 in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, and I think that that's just enough for them to hold in there. Set a line of a 8.5, so 9+ won't take those points with Northeastern, even with the Pratt injury, and I did set a total of 144.5. I like the under. 6-9, 6-10 on the betting board. UC Santa Barbara is going to be on the road facing off against Nevada. Nevada's a 5-point favorite total on this game. It is 151, and I set a total of 143. I do like the under. Now for UC Santa Barbara, they are traditionally a relatively slow team. Last year, they were outside the top 250 in terms of total possessions per game. It appears as though bringing in Ada Mahaney and a lot of backcourt firepower, that they're going to be playing a little bit more quickly this year, closer to about 235th in the country in terms of total possessions per game as of right now. And then this is a Nevada team that over the last few seasons, they have played really slow under Steve Alford. As of right now, they are clocking in about 200th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Last year, they were outside the top 300. I do think that they're going to be closer to about like the low 200s this season, because they do bring in some guards. I like Tayshaun Comer is a guy that was over at Evansville last year, giving that team 16 points, 3.5 assists per game. You've got Corey Camper. He was really good at generating turnovers over at UTEP last year. He's been able to supply 15 points per game. And down low, even though you do lose a guy that I really liked in Nick Davidson, you've got Joel Armatrain back. He began his career over at UC Riverside, actually. He's been able to give the team 6+ rebounds per game over the last few seasons, and I do think that that's going to be big in this ordeal, though I could only set my line at 3. This is a Nevada squad that always does the little things well. They don't turn the ball over a lot. They're doing a great job in terms of being a top 50 team with regards to rebound percentage. They are allowing opponents to shoot over 36% from three-point range, and for Santa Barbara, you got really good versatility with this team. Mahaney, who I mentioned before, has come in. He's given the team 15 points per game. Colin Smith, who began his career over at Vanderbilt, 6'8" combo player, has always been a career close to 40% three-point shooter. Currently shooting 63% from three. That'll go downward, but he's been rock solid with 18 points per game. This is a Santa Barbara team that they themselves have been a top 75 unit with regards to rebound percentage. They've been allowing opponents to shoot 39% from three. I do think that there's going to be quite a bit of regression with that, so I do think that that's going to help you out with regards to this under, but I do think that this Santa Barbara team holds in there with bringing in Mario Little, began his career over at BYU in Utah, was a nice scorer over there. He's been able to give this team 15 points, 7 boards, 4 assists, just really a nice stat sheet suffer. Jason Fontenette has been a nice sixth man for his team, and then you got Hosanna Kitnage, who began his career over at Coastal Carolina. Last year, he was at Louisiana, gave that team 12 points, 6.5 boards, steal per contest. He brings a little bit of rough and tumble down low, and I do think that Santa Barbara is going to be able to do a solid job of generating turnovers. Last year, they were top 80 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, so I do think that helps them hold in there. I did set my line at 3. I'm going to be 1/3 points with Santa Barbara. I think that you get a little bit more of a slow and control game. Set my total 143. I'm in on the under. 6-11, 6-12 on the betting board. It is Missouri State. They play UT Rio Grande Valley. The Vaqueros of UT Rio Grande Valley, 1.5 point underdogs. Total on this game, it is 150, and I said Missouri State is a 7-point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay this number. For this Grand Valley squad, a lot of their identity is just taking a lot of twos. This has been a unit that over the last few seasons, they have been really looking to pound the ball inside, and I just don't feel very good about this offense right now, because for Grand Valley, they've lost a lot of guys via the transfer portal over the last few seasons. Now, they did bring in a pair of guys I really liked, and they've been the main two scorers. Marvin McGee was a 10-point per game scorer over at UC Santa Barbara last year, career mid-33-point shooter, and then Corey Kahn, very rock solid over at Jacksonville State last season. He was a serve for them, 7 points, 3 boards, career about 32% three-point shooter, so he's not really going to give you a lot of pop there, but it's very clear that the facilitation has not been on par for this team. They've been looking to a lot of Jalen Washington to be able to dole it out. He's been giving the team about 3 assists per game, and this is a team that's trying to play a small ball style basketball while not necessarily taking the world's greatest amount of threes. And for Grand Valley, through 4 games, they're actually shooting 46% from three-point range. That said, much of that comes due to the fact that they took down Southwest Adventist or something like that. Like, they scored 110 points in that game, completely warps the numbers, and they need Always Right, that's his actual name, to really be able to come through. He comes over from Rhode Island. He was a very highly touted junior college transfer a few seasons ago, has never really been able to find his footing, and for this Grand Valley team, turned the ball over about 12 times per contest overall, but I mean, again, against the D1 competition that they played, they've had a little bit of a tougher time with it, and Missouri State is a team that has been a little bit sloppy with the ball as well, so it makes it a bit intriguing in this spot. I did set a little bit of higher total because you do have a Grand Valley team that does like to be able to speed it up quite a bit. I did set my total at a 153. I like the over, but for Missouri State, I do think that having someone like a Michael O.C. Barusu, who last season gave the team 7 rebounds per game, a little bit undersized at 6'4", but the way that he hits the board is going to be rock solid. You've got Darian Sutton, who's been able to give the team 7.5 rebounds per game, and with regards to Missouri State, they've been a top 150 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, and this is one of those teams that should see a lot of positivity with their three-point shooting. Right now, shooting 24% from three after they were an above-average team with their three-point shooting a season ago, and they bring back Zaxton King from season ago. King, he was the king of being able to shoot 38.5% from three, gave that team 9 points, about 3 rebounds per game last season. Then you've had Trey Williams Jr. come in, be able to do a good job from the non-D1 ranks, be able to give the team 10 points, 2.5 assists per game. I like the overall versatility of this Missouri State team, and I do think that Missouri State going to be able to do a pretty solid job. It's going to be interesting to see what sort of a tempo Missouri State is going to be looking to play this year, because Conzo Martin, all throughout his coaching career, has had a lot of different stops. It's been up, down, all around. Right now for Missouri State, about 82nd in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Grand Valley 59th. So I do think that you get a little bit of a higher total here. I did set my total 153. I like the over, and for this Missouri State team, I set them as a favorite of 7. I'm going to be willing to lay that number. 613, 614 on the betting board. Neutral court game from Portland as St. Thomas and Cal State Fullerton do battle. St. Thomas is a favorite of 10.5 points, and your total is 155.5, and I'm going to be willing to lay it with the Tommies. I set them as a double-figure favorite, as for Fullerton, just a team that last year could not get online with their offense. That's why I set St. Thomas as a 14-point favorite. You do want to know, with the St. Thomas team dead last in the country right now in terms of offensive rebound percentage, you're actually rebounding fewer than 10% of their missed shots as an offensive rebound. But the thing is, you've got a lot of guys that they do a good job with their offensive efficiency. A top 15 team with their 2-point shooting percentage, and you know that the 3-point shooting is going to come along for the ride. Entered into the day on Friday shooting just 31.7% for 3, but Noah Minsale, he's come in, he's been able to give the team 21.5 points per contest, the main holdover guy from a season ago. And then you do have guys like Ryan Defoe, Parker Bajorke, Ben Oosterbaan that were like 5 to 7 point per game scores from a season ago. And a lot of these guys are back to where they were a season ago. They just know their role. But you've got Nick Jankowski, who comes over from Pewaukee, Wisconsin. He's done a great job being able to supply the team 14.5 points per contest. You've got Austin Hero, of relation to Tyler Hero, who's been able to give a little bit of pop in the backcourt. And for St. Thomas last year, they were a top 125 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis. More middle of the road to begin the season this year. And Fullerton is a bit better with yards backcourt than a season ago. Last year, they had absolutely no point guard whatsoever. Now they bring in a guy, Bailey Nunn, who last year over at Sacramento State was giving that team 2.5 to 3 assists per game. Not too much of a primary scorer, but that does help out the likes of a Jefferson de la Cruz Monegro, who began his career over at Valparaiso, Western Michigan. He's been able to supply about 12 to 13 points per game. Bryce Cofield has come on up from the non-D1 ranks, and he's been able to, as a little bit of a reserve, actually as a true freshman, been able to give this team 13 points per contest. So that's been helpful, but you're going to need to get a little bit more down low for this bunch. They did retain one guy in Kendrick DeLuna from a year ago. He's at 6'10", able to give you about 3 to 4 rebounds per game. That's really the way that you take down this St. Thomas team. But with that said, this is not a great rebounding team either with regards to Fullerton. Currently checking in at 272nd in the country in terms of rebound percentage, and with the way that St. Thomas always does a great job of being able to take care of the ball, and even though Fullerton, they do have a little bit better with regards to their facilitation, this has still been a Fullerton team that has had a little bit of tough time taking care of the ball in the games played away from them. They've been turning the ball over on about 19% of possessions. Fullerton has actually been playing very up-tempo, by the way, currently a top 50 team in terms of total possessions per game. Does feel like they're playing a little bit too fast for their own good. They've been giving up nearly 88 points per contest, and the only reason why their offensive numbers look a little bit better is that they take down Caltech. They score 136 points in that game. Past that, they've had some struggles with regards to their offense. So this is a circumstance where I did set a total here of a 150. I'm going to be in on the under. And with St. Thomas, I did set them as the favorite of 14 points. I'm going to be willing to lay that number. 615, 616 on the card. This is from the Sanford Pentagon, San Francisco, Minnesota in a neutral court game. Right now, San Francisco a 2-point favorite. Tonight's game, you're getting it at a 139, and I did set a total of a 143.5. I like the over. Now, Nico Medved's teams, back when he was over at Colorado State, always outside the top 250 in terms of total possessions per game, and Minnesota outside the top 225 in terms of possessions per 40 minutes. Numbers a little bit warped because they do play that overtime game against UW Green Bay. A very, very stunning game to say the least. But that said, this is a Minnesota team that should be pretty efficient on offense. The Colorado State teams that he was coaching were always in the top 60 in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, and there should be some positivity to the fact that Minnesota's right now shooting 27.3% from three-point range. I don't think they're going to be an amazing three-point shooting team, but you got Cade Tyson, who 2 years ago over at Belmont was giving that team 17-plus points per contest, shot over 42% from three, and he's right now packing it in with 23 points, and he's shooting 39.5% from three. Really, nobody else on the roster is shooting above 30.5% from three that has attempted more than 2 threes thus far this season. Chancey Willis, now he's not too much of a three-point shooter, but he comes over from Western Michigan. He's been able to get the team 4 assists, 7 points per contest with Minnesota. They've done a good job being able to run good, clean offense. They're grabbing 14 offensive rebounds per game. They're only turning the ball over about 11 times per contest. They've been a top 50 team with regards to rebound percentage, but now they do run into a San Francisco team that I really like what Mookie Cook is bringing to the table. A former top 75 recruit, just had a tough time getting out there on the floor for Oregon last season, but 13 points, 6 assists per game, and then you've got a guy in Ryan Beasley who's been very rock solid in this backcourt as well. Had a nice end of the season last year. Was cold a little bit to begin the season, but still, this is someone that does a nice job in terms of giving you some outside shooting career, about 33% three-point shooter, throwing in there about 14 points, 2 steals per contest. You bring back Tyrone Riley, who was very good for them as a freshman last year, 6'6", a little bit of a do-it-all guy that's a career mid-30s point shooter, throwing in there about 10 points per contest, so I do like what he's able to bring to the table. Lots of good versatility with a San Francisco team that their main kryptonite has been turnovers. They face a Minnesota team that has been okay at being able to generate turnovers, but with San Francisco, they're always a top 50 team in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. They do a nice job down low. I do, though, think that this is going to be close enough for late game fouling. I think that San Francisco does just enough with their offense to be able to get it done here. I set them as a 3.5 point favorite, so at that 2, I'm going to be willing to lay the number. And again, I think that this is close enough for late game fouling. I think that Minnesota is going to be slow but efficient. Semi-total 143.5. I do like that over. This is from Weston Hall, so neutral court game between North Dakota and Coastal Carolina. This is 617, 618. North Dakota, a 2-point dog. Total on this game, it is a 148. And with Coastal Carolina, I did set them as a 3-point favorite, so I'm going to be willing to lay the 2. North Dakota's a little bit better on defense than they were a season ago. No, they were 355th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis last year, so it's hard to really go down from there, but and they've been a little bit more respectable with that regard. Even with going up against Creighton, Alabama, they're giving up fewer than 77.5 points per contest, which that doesn't sound like much, but that's improvement for them. But you do have an offense that's currently stuck in neutral. They're outside the top 225 in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, and you don't necessarily have a ton down low for this North Dakota team. You've been able to get right around about 5 rebounds per game. George Natchavili, who's been able to supply 7 points per game. They've been generating some turnovers, by the way. Eli King, 3 steals, 9 points per contest, began his career over at Iowa State. He's been solid in terms of helping out with that, and each of your top 6 scorers are generating more than a steal per game for North Dakota, so that's been big for them, but they are a team that they gamble a little bit for turnovers. They are really getting bludgeoned down low. They are outside the top 350 in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage, and this is a Coastal Carolina team that they do embrace the inside a little bit, even with losing Noah Ammenhauser, who was very good for them down low a season ago. You bring in Jerry Nagopot. He began his career over at UL Monroe. He's been able to get the team 6.5 rebounds per game. AJ Dantzler, he comes over after being at Moyne last season. He and Rashid Jones, who are more guards, they're both giving you 5+ rebounds per game. As a matter of fact, out of your top 5 scorers for this bunch, you've got 4 of them giving you over 5 rebounds per game, and I do think that for Coastal Carolina, they're going to do a nice job down low as they've been allowing opponents to grab just 7 offensive rebounds per game. They're actually a top 25 team with regards to defensive rebound percentage. The fact that they don't generate any turnovers whatsoever, this is a Coastal Carolina team that was dead last in the country in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, does hurt them, but you're bringing Joshua Beadle. He began his career over at Clemson and Boston College, has been around the block in the ACC, and was a part-time starter last year over at Boston College. He's come in, he's been able to breathe a lot of life into this offense. 19 points per game. Coastal Carolina last year was well outside the top 300 in terms of total possessions per game. Appears as though they're going to be a little bit faster this year, and this is a North Dakota team that typically they're a more mid-tempo team, but they're just really inefficient with regards to the defensive side of things, so that always makes the scoring look a little bit higher than what it is. But against a Coastal Carolina team that I think is going to do a relatively good job down low, with North Dakota taking a step back with regards to their offense, I do think you get a lower scoring game, semi-total 143. I'm in on the under, and with Coastal Carolina, made them the 3-point favorite, so want to lay the deuce. 619, 620 on the card. UW Milwaukee's on the road against Wichita St. Wichita State, a favorite of 11 to 11.5 points. 159 is the total, and I set a total of 157.5. I do like the under for Wichita State. I do think that they're a much improved team with their 3-point shooting from 8 seasons ago. Last year, ranked 39th in the country in terms of three-point shooting percentage. It was big that they brought in Keenan Giles, who was a top scorer over at UNC Greensboro last year. Last year, 15 points per game, shot over 40% for three. He's currently shooting 59.3% for three. That'll be going downward a little bit. And Wichita State as a whole, they're shooting 39.5% for three. I think that you're going to be somewhere between A and B. Last year, they shot about 30% for three. Right now, they're shooting 39.5% for three. I think this will be more like 35 when it's all said and done. But you've also got a Wichita State team that's in the top 50 in terms of rebound percentage. I don't think that this goes into a slump. You got Karan Boyd, who is a 6+ rebound per game guy over at ETSU. He's been able to be rock solid and has let it fly from three. And then the Will Berg, a 7'2" big man that comes in for Purdue, just lost in the shadow of Zach Edey, Trey Kaufman, Ryan, and all those guys. And for Milwaukee, they've taken a bit of a step back with regards to rebounding last year. Top 5 team in terms of rebound percentage, with Michael Silva leading the way. But you still have a guy like a Danilo Janovic. He began his career over at SMU. At 6'8", he's supplying 12.6 rebounds per game. It is a Milwaukee team that has been able to do a much better job of taking care of the ball, down to about 11 turnovers per game. The three-point shooting has been a little bit better with bringing in Amar Ulyagard. He is a very highly touted junior college transfer that he was at Fresno State a season ago, and he got out of there before the gambling scandal. He was averaging 13 points per contest. Has never really been a great three-point shooter, but he's able to do a nice job as a 6'5", 6'6", a little bit of a do-it-all sort of guy. And then Seth Hubbard, he was one of the main guys over at Western Michigan 2 seasons ago. He was able to give that team 14 points per game. He's never been like an explosive three-point shooter. Right now, shooting 39% for three. I think that there's going to be a little bit of regression there, but that said, I do think that for this UW Milwaukee team, I think that they're going to do a little bit of a better job in terms of guarding the three-point line. Opponents are right now shooting 41.2% from three. I think that that's just a little bit of a bad sample size. I think that Milwaukee does a nice job holding in there against a Wichita State team that's coming off of a pretty grueling game a few nights ago against Boise State, where it was a slog. They had to do a lot of travel, and I do think that UW Milwaukee holds in there and improves a little bit on the glass. I did set my line here at a 9.5, so going to be willing to take those points with Milwaukee. Set a total of 157.5, so you're at the 159. I'm in on the under. 621, 622 on the betting board. We go to Tennessee, Louisiana Monroe, and Morehead St. They play host over at ETSU's gym, and for Morehead State, 5.5-point favorites. The last game, it is 150, and I did set Morehead State as a 4.5-point favorite, so here at the 5+, I'm going to be willing to take the points with Monroe. It is a Morehead State team that is traditionally just a very defense-oriented team, and typically it's very slow and controlled. Morehead State, year in and year out, they've been outside the top 300 in terms of total possessions per game. They're maybe speeding up a half a step this year. They're right now about 111th in the country in terms of total possessions per game, but they're coming off of a slog in their last game. A little bit of byproduct of playing against a team like Georgia to begin the season, so I do think that they're going to be dialing it back a little bit, and they always look to be able to run through things down low as they bring in West Georgia transfer Tamari Belford. At 6'8", he's been able to give this team about 5 boards per contest. You've got a 6'7" shifty guy in John Carroll, who comes on up from the non-D1 ranks, 10.5 points, 7 rebounds per game, and Morehead State, as per usual, leaving something to be desired with the outside shooting. They're shooting 31% from three-point range. I think that this is going to be a, shall we say, mainstay, as George Marshall, he's been with the program for a few seasons. He's right now giving you 15 points, 2.5 assists. He's doing a good job in terms of being able to lead the charge for the team, and Morehead State is right now about 200th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. I do think that improves quite a bit, but I do think that Louisiana Monroe is going to be able to hold in there. They're now under the tutelage of Phil Cunningham. He was the coach for Troy for a very long time, and he's brought with him quite a few guys that were a little bit out of sight, out of mind, and I do think that for this Monroe team, what is going to be really big for them moving forward is getting the production that they have thus far out of Matavius Russell. He began his career over at Mississippi State, was really the big ticket guy that they got in the transfer portal. He's right now supplying 16 points per game, shooting over 41% for three. Don't know if that's going to be necessarily a mainstay, but he's been able to do a nice job helping flow this offense. Now it's a Monroe team that's going to lose the battle down low. You don't have a single guy on this roster that's giving you more than 5 rebounds per game, but for this Monroe team, they've been a pretty average team in terms of being able to generate turnovers. They've done a nice job being able to put on there a little bit of pressure, and I do think that the second-year man, Christian Lewis, who comes on up from the non-D1 ranks, he was pretty highly touted in terms of the non-D1 ranks in terms of his portal ranking. 12 points, 4 boards, 4 assists. He's been able to do a nice job there, and they're still dealing with the injury to Brantley Noel. He was coming out over from Southern at 6'10". That's a bit of a reason why they've been really suffering with regards to being able to hit the boards, but I just don't know if the Morehead State offense is going to be efficient enough to be able to get the job done for this Louisiana Monroe team. I do think that they're going to be a little bit more up-tempo than they were a season ago, but that's just what you're going to get with regards to a coaching change right now with this Louisiana Monroe team. In terms of total possessions per game, they're checking in around 130th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. I do think that things taper off a little bit with regards to tempo in this game. I set my total at a 140.5. I like the under, and at 5+, I'm going to be willing to take the points with Monroe. 623, 624 on the card. It is Indiana State, and they're going to be playing against Ball State. Ball State is a underdog of 7 points. In your total on this game, it is 147, and I personally set a total of 156.5. I'm going to be in on the over. You've got an Indiana State team that really struggled with their defense last year. They were well outside the top 250 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, and they do bring back quite a few guys from a season ago, like Camp Wagner, who was able to give you 8 points, shot it relatively well from 3-point range. You bring back Marcus Harding, a guy that's 6'10", has a little bit of shiftiness. He'll give you 4 rebounds per game, but they did a really good job in terms of holding down Louisiana Tech a few days ago, but there's reason to believe that they're going to be really, really bad on offense this season, and that's why you've got a warped number with Indiana State being right around about 133rd in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, and they do square off against a Ball State team that's hovering more around about 191st in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. I think that Ball State is going to be a relatively mid-tempo team, and for Indiana State last year, they were a top 75 team in terms of total possessions per game. It looks like they're going to be dialed back a little bit, but I think that Ball State holds in there because you've got a backcourt that I really like with Elmore James coming over from Ohio, where he was the nice, like, off the bench, 7-point per game guy. Amari Ziegler, he was rock solid over at St. Peter's the last 2 seasons. Last season gave that team 11 points, 6 boards, 2.5 per contest, just does a little bit of this and that. Cam Denson has been around the block in the West Coast over at Long Beach State, Pacific. He's always going to give you like 6-7 points per contest, but I think the X factor here is Juwan Maxey, who really hasn't gotten going this season. He was over at Youngstown State last season, where he gave that team about 11.5 points. He was a solid starter for them, a little bit over 2 assists per game. He's only been averaging about 5 points per contest, and then Devin Barnes should help this team generate many more turnovers, as that's really been the hallmark of this Ball State team thus far this season. They've been a top 55 team in terms of turnovers force on a per possession basis, so they do a nice job in terms of being able to generate those turnovers. For Indiana State last year, they were outside the top 300 in terms of ball security, and I think that those turnovers make things a little bit more harebrainy and crazy. I think that Indiana State going to be able to knock down the open shots that they get, but I think that Ball State generates enough turnovers to be able to hold in this game. Set my line at 4.5. I'm going to be willing to take those points with Ball State, and I'm going to be in on the over. Set my total 156.5. 625, 626 on the card. It is Portland, and they play us in Northern Colorado. Northern Colorado is a road favorite of 4 points. So on this game, it is 154, and I did set a total of a 156.5. I like the over. With Northern Colorado, they do a good job of being able to own things inside. Last year, they were a top 10 team in terms of their defensive rebound percentage, and they were a top 25 team with regards to 2-point shooting percentage. Now, they do take quite a few threes to be able to set this up, and currently, they are taking more 3-point shots than 2-point shots going into their game Friday night. But, I mean, this is a bunch that has been able to find a nice facilitator in Quinn Dinker. He came over from Idaho about 2 years ago, so he spent multiple years in the system, entered in the day on Friday, averaging 15 points, 7.5 assists per game, and Zach Block is right now shooting 61% from 3. That's going to be going downward. You've got Brock Wisney shooting 80% from 3. These are guys that are going to be experiencing a little bit of regression, but that said, they're once again doing a really good job of being able to hold their opponents to one-and-done opportunities. Their opponents are going to shoot a little bit higher than 26% from 3-point range like they were entering into this tournament, so I'm going to be in on the over, especially with a Portland team that, boy, this team bleeds points. Last year, Portland was outside the top 330 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. Typically an up-tempo team. I do sense this Portland team looking to go a little bit more slow and controlled because Shante Leggins, he came over many years ago from Eastern Washington. All of his Eastern Washington guys are out of eligibility, so they're looking to be able to turn over a little bit of a new leaf there. And for this Portland team, they are looking to generate a few more turnovers. They're 91st in the country right now in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, but with gambling for turnovers, that has left them a little bit open to giving up some 3-point shots as well. So you've got the positives and the negatives there, and then you do have a Northern Colorado team that entered into this tournament currently number 4 in all of college basketball in terms of total possessions per game. I think that that's a little bit more of a byproduct of the small sample size, but I do think that you're going to get a little bit more of an up and down game. And for this Portland team, even though they're at home, you're going to have a little bit of a tough time down low, though. I do like Jermaine Balsinger-Webb. He came on over from American a few seasons ago. He's a true 7-footer, only giving the team, though, about 7 points, 3.5 rebounds per game. Makai Balu, he comes over, and he's been able to give the team 13 points per contest. He's been pretty rock solid, but for this Portland bunch, it's just a lot of mixing and matching with not much returning from the season ago. Their main guy has been Joel Foxwell. It's been a rock solid freshman coming over from Australia. 15 points, 4 boards, 5 assists per game for a Portland team that has left something to be desired with their three-point shooting, only shooting about 28.5% from the outside. I do think Northern Colorado is going to do a relatively solid job of being able to control things down low. This is going to be a back-to-back for them, though, and this is going to be a true home game for Portland, so I do think that has a little bit of an impact, and I do think that for Northern Colorado, they're going to see a lot of, shall we say, negative regression to the way that teams are shooting from three-point range against them, so set a line of 3.5 at 4. That does become my buy point on Portland, and I made a total of 156 after, so I hit the back-to-back. I'm going to be in on the over. So 627, 628 on the card. Weber State is playing us UT Arlington. Arlington is an underdog of 2 points, and total on this game, it is 153, and I did make Weber State a 6-point favorite. Going to be willing to lay this number as you've got a UT Arlington team that's coming off of a back-to-back themselves, so that's going to be negatively impacting them. For UT Arlington, they also lose 9 out of their top 10 scores from a season ago. Rayshon Semester is pretty much the lone guy that returns, and they had a grueling slog of a game against Campbell yesterday where they lost that game 71-67, and just outside of Semester, you don't know what you're going to get night in and night out. He's been rock solid. He's been giving the team right around about 17 points, 6 to 7 rebounds, a pair of assists per contest, and Cameron Jackson was that main guy yesterday. He's been able to give this team at 6'8", right around about 6 rebounds per game, so he's doing a good job there, but the backcourt is very much a work in progress. They've got a guy named Cash Chavis, which that's a great name. He's been able to give out about 5.5 assists per contest, but I mean, he's been up, down, all around. Actually began his career over at Arkansas. Marcus Rigsby, he's been a priority reserve after he a season ago was over at Troy. He's been trying to find his bearings after he was actually a starter for Troy, but only shot about 29% from 3, wasn't a part of that team that was able to do such a good job in terms of generating turnovers. And Marcel McCreary is one of your top scorers coming over from Northern Colorado. Just a lot of mystery, and that's caused for this UT Arlington team to once again have the issues that they have in the past. Turnovers are back outside the top 275 in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis. Now, this is not a Weber State team that's really going to be pressing the issue. They're not going to be generating like 100 billion turnovers or anything like that, but Weber State has really good versatility, and they do a nice job playing positionless basketball. Now, Weber State is currently in the top 40 in terms of total possessions per game after they were well outside the top 250 a season ago. I do think that tapers down, and I do think that with this being a back-to-back, that is going to negatively impact the scoring a little bit, but you've got a pair of guys in Trevor Henning and Jace Whiting for this Weber State team, combining for about 30 points per contest. With Whiting, he's been around the block over at UNLV and Boise State, just could never really find great minutes there. He's going out 2.5 assists. He's shooting about 39% from three-point range. It is a Weber State team that has been solid in terms of taking care of the ball. They're turning the ball about 12.5 times per game, but keep in mind they also had an overtime game against Utah, so they're doing a nice job there. This Weber State team has been a top 75 unit in terms of rebound percentage. Now, they should see this go northward. Teams are shooting 16.7% from three-point range against them after Weber State was well outside the top 275 with that regard. That is going to be going northward, but I said Weber State, I do think gets the job done against this UT Arlington team, and even though we're going to see a regression on that 16.7% three-point shooting, they've still done a nice job in terms of being able to guard the arc, so I did set Weber State as a 6-point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay the number in. Made a total of 150. I'm in on the under. 629, 630 on the card. It is Northern Iowa. They're going to be on the road against UC Irvine. Zot, the Anteaters are a 1-point favorite. Total on this game is 137, and I said UC Irvine as a favorite of 3.5 points. I'm going to be willing to lay the very small number with them. For Northern Iowa, obviously, it's a lot of travel. And for this Irvine team, year in and year out, they just do such a great job on the glass. And for Northern Iowa, they do a lot of things well. They do all good, clean offense. They don't turn the ball over. They get really efficient three-point shooting. You bring back much of that backcourt from a season ago in Trey Campbell and Leon Bond. Bond began his career over at Virginia. He's been able to give you 15 points per game. Trey Campbell just did it all last year with 11.5 points, 4 boards, 3 assists, 2.5 per contest, and shot over 40% from 3. He's back at it once again this season, but you lose that main big man in Jacob Hudson, and you really only have one guy in the rotation that's above 6'6" in Ben Schwieger. He's been able to give you 9.5 points per game, but isn't necessarily a guy that's going to be able to dominate down low. So for these two teams, it's going to be strength on strength. For Irvine, it's going to be pile driving the glass, and for Northern Iowa, it's going to be controlling the perimeter. But for this UC Irvine team, you've got a pair of nice guards I like. Jerion Dixon, he's back from a season ago. He's right now supplying 19 points, 3 assists per game. He's been able to take a stride forward after he was a nice player for them last year. Don't think his 48% three-point shooting continues, but still has been rock solid. And Darren Sarin, 2 years ago, he was with this program averaging 10 points per contest. He went on over to Stanford last season where he just couldn't find any minutes. He's back here, and now he's giving you 12 points per contest. And with this Irvine team lost in the shadow of the likes of Ben Lyken and company, you've got a big man in Kyle Evans who's been able to take some strides forward, 6.5 boards, 10.5 points per contest after he was more of a reserve a season ago, but a nice nice rim protector, and you just have a lot of depth down low with this team, as you've got Akeva, McKimby Griffin, hopefully I said that correct, along Nas and Meke, who have been able to do a nice job combining for about 8.5 rebounds per game. Not necessarily offensive forces or guys that are going to be able to pop it from three like Devin Tillis was a season ago. So Irvine is a little bit more of a mid-tempo team. They're going to suffer a little bit there, but this team has been able to be one of the best in all of college basketball in terms of generating second and third chances. They're right now a top 10 team in terms of blocking shots for Northern Iowa. They have gone back a little bit more to their roots. Last year, they were outside the top 300 in terms of total possessions per game. They've been looking to play a little bit more slowly this year, but I do think that this is going to be an efficient enough game for you to be able to get the over. I think that this is going to be close enough for late game fouling as well. So I did set a total here of a 139.5. I'm in on the over, and with this Irvine team, I think that they win from within, set them as a 3.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay the number. These next two games are out there from the Paradise Jam, and because these teams played on Friday, we currently don't have any lines up on the board, so I'll get you guys my handicap. 631, 632, UW Green Bay and UMass. They are going to be doing battle out there on a neutral court from the Virgin Islands, and my handicap is UMass being a 13-point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay 12.5 with them. 13.5 or more, take the points with Green Bay. Set a total of 153, 152.5 or less, and on the over 153.5 or higher the under. Green Bay looked like they were going to get completely blown out by Yale, but they actually were able to get a cover on Friday, so yay verily to them. They're still a team that's outside the top 280 in terms of both points scored and points allowed on a per possession basis, and Green Bay is really looking to slow it down. They entered into yesterday 300th in the country in terms of total possessions per game, and this is a UMass team that they are very much looking to bump up their tempo with UMass in terms of total possessions per game. Entered into yesterday 27th, but Massachusetts is much more of a defense-oriented team that is based around being able to hit the boards, and that's something that Green Bay does not do a great job of. In Doug Gottlieb's era, they have been outside the top 330 in terms of offensive rebound percentage, and this is a UMass team that they've done a very good job in terms of being a top 50 team. With regards to rebound percentage, you've got Daniel Hankins-Sanford, who's back from a season ago where he was able to give that team about like 7.6 boards per contest, and he's back to about 8 points, 5.5 rebounds per game. And then Leonardo Batil, he comes over after he was at Abilene Christian a season ago, going into yesterday, 18.5 points, 10.5 boards. He's turning the ball over about 4 times per contest, and this is a UMass team that has had their issues there. They are outside the top 300 in terms of ball security, but they're also doing a great job generating turnovers as well. They're a bit better with their three-point shooting than they were a season ago as well. You bring in a guy, Marcus Banks, who he last season over at UMBC gave that team 16 plus points per contest, shot over 41% from three. That helps. And for UW Green Bay, Marcus Hall has been very good. Hall has been able to give this team 15 plus points per contest. He does a little bit of everything, grabbing some rebounds, and it's just a case of who's going to be able to step up around him, because you've got Preston Rudinger back from a season ago where he was giving that team about 7 to 8 points per contest, and he's been very hot and cold to begin the season. Mac Recchi, he was one of the guys that returned from a year ago. He's only been able to give you about 5.5 points per game. You just don't have a ton down low outside of Morian Cicic, and Cicic, he's at like 6'10", comes in from Montenegro, only giving you like 2.5 rebounds per game. He's getting starts and he's not doing anything whatsoever. LeBron Thomas comes on up from the non-D1 ranks. He had a relatively solid game on Friday, but prior to Friday, he wasn't really doing anything whatsoever. So I do think that UMass is going to be able to win this game from within. I'm willing to lay up to 12.5 with them, 13.5 for more, taking the points with Green Bay, and then 152.5 or less, and on the over 153.5 or higher, the under. And then this is going to be the last game on the normal Las Vegas betting board before we hit the extra games. This is 6:33, 6:34. Iona is going to be taking on Oregon State. I said Iona as a 2.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay up to 2 with them, 3 or more, taking the points with Oregon State, and then set a total of a 150.5, 150 or less. I'm in on the over 151 or higher, the under. This is just a good old tempo battle right here. You've got an Oregon State team well outside the top 300 in terms of total possessions per game, and for Iona, they entered in the day yesterday 40th in the country in terms of total possessions per game, and Iona entered into yesterday with opponents shooting less than 23% from three-point range. And do I think that they could be a good perimeter defense? Absolutely, but you knew that there was going to be some negative regression there in Akron. They put up a nice hearty 96 spot on them, but that said, with this Iona team, you do have quite a few guys who are able to bomb it from three as well. Denver Anglin, he comes in after he over at Rice was able to shoot 38% from three-point range. CJ Anthony, they transfer from Cincinnati. He's been able to give this team a lot in the backcourt. He's been able to dole out about 6 assists per game. Now, also had 7 turnovers in the game yesterday, but he's been able to give you 15 points per game. And Keyshawn Williams, he was a really good go-to scorer many years ago over in Northern Illinois. You go back to that 2022-23 season, he was putting in there about 18 points, 4.5 boards, 2.5 assists. Ever since then, has dealt with injury. It was a little bit more of an ancillary piece over at Colorado State last season, but he has the ability to really be able to light it up. And for Oregon State, they did lose their top 3 scorers from a season ago, but that said, this is an Oregon State team that does have some relatively good pieces in the backcourt, like an Isaiah C, who he's one of the main holdovers from a season ago. He's able to give you double figures. He's an okay 3-point shooter. Main guy that they've really been looking to for a little bit of everything is Josiah Lake, because they have not been able to get a lot of rebounding. He, with his 5 rebounds per game, actually leads the way, and he's been able to supply the team with 13 points per contest, which means that you need to get a little bit more of Stephen Olawani. He's been seeing a very sparing amount of minutes along Ores Diaz-Graham. Both of these guys a single-digit amount of minutes yesterday, and they're supposed to be your main big men, along with Noah Ammenhauser. Ammenhauser has been really glued to the bench to begin the season. He did have a little bit more of a role yesterday at 7'2" over at Coastal Carolina last season, was giving that team 5 to 6 rebounds per game, but Oregon State has been playing a lot of small ball, even though they play super duper slowly, which I find that to be intriguing. And for Oregon State, they've been relatively solid in terms of generating turnovers, but they themselves outside the top 260 in terms of taking care of the ball. This has been an Iona team that's been pretty rock solid in terms of being able to generate turnovers as well. This Iona team entered into yesterday generating about 14 turnovers per contest. Iona very much having a tough time grabbing offensive rebounds, but that said, with Oregon State not necessarily getting their big men going, I do think that Iona should be the favorite. 1 to lay up to 2 with Iona, 3 or more taking the points with Oregon State. 150 or less, like the over, 151 or higher the under, and now we hit the extra games.
The normal betting board picks are complete, but there are some extra games today, so we go into the bonus.
306-553, 306-554. NJIT is on the road facing off against Navy, and Navy is a 13.5 point favorite. Right now, this total is off the board, but I've got my handicap with that total. I set mine at a 140.5, so 140 or less, I'm going to be in on the over, 141 or higher the under. And with Navy, I could only set them as a 12.5 point favorite. So now that we're getting 13 plus, I'm going to be willing to take the points with NJIT. Now, it is an NJIT team that's a little bit banged up. Sebastian Robinson has been out of the lineup over the last few games, so that's been a little bit of a concern for them. But still, you've been able to have Ari Fulton, who stayed with the program last season, gave that team like 7 points, few rebounds per game, and he's been rock solid down low. 6'7", a little bit of a do-it-all guy, 8 rebounds, 12.5 points per game. You've got Malachi Arrington, who's come in. He's been able to give you about 7 points, 5 rebounds as a 6'11" big man. And on the other end for Navy, this is a team that typically could just play bully ball down low, because you got Aiden Koe along with, from no relation to Mad Men, Don Draper, who's been able to do a nice job with Draper. He just gives you a little bit of everything at 6'6" 11 points, 7.5 boards, 3.5 assists per game, and then KOA has been able to give you 7 boards and 10 points per contest. And then your main guys in the backcourt, Anson Mangini, Jinwoo Kim, these two guys are combined for about 28.5 points per game, and Kim shot 40% from 3 last year, in the mid-30s right now this season. And for Navy, typically when their team is firing on all cylinders, they're just doing the little things well. Right now, they've been a top 125 team. In terms of defensive rebound percentage, not allowing a lot of second chances, they're relatively pedestrian in the way that they've been generating turnovers, but this is not a team that attempts a lot of threes. They look to be able to pile drive the ball down low. Now, they have been allowing teams to shoot about 53.5% on their twos. That's been a little bit of an issue, and I do think that for NJIT, with them having the injuries that they've got in the backcourt, that's going to be able to help them out quite a bit. And I do think that they hold in there, especially with the fact that you've gotten some nice facilitation out of a 6'6", a little bit of a point wing, and Jordan Rogers, who's been able to give you 2.5 assists per game, and then the freshman in David Bolden stepping up, being able to give this team 3 assists per contest for an NJIT team that is right now shooting only 31.5% from 3, but last year they guarded the arc relatively well. They're back at that this year, allowing teams to shoot just 27% from the outside. So 140 or less in on the over, 141 or higher the under, and at 13 plus right now, seeing 13.5, I'm going to be willing to take those points with NJIT. 306-555, 306-556. It is Wagner, and they're on the road facing off against Georgetown. Wagner's a pretty sizable underdog here of 23.5 points out on this game, between 136.5 to a 137.5, and with Wagner, I did set them as a 22.5 point underdog. I'm going to be willing to take the points. Now, the Wagner offense back outside the top 300 in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, but you know that this team is going to slow it down, and you know that this team is going to be pretty rock solid on defense, despite the fact that they're 0-4. Team that has been able to do a relatively solid job on the glass. They're pulling in there about 12 offensive rebounds per game. Now, in terms of the defensive rebounding, they've been well outside the top 300, so that's been a little little bit less than ideal as they look to Eduardo Placer, the brother of Jose Placer, who was very rock solid for North Florida back in the day. He's been able to give the team 12 points per contest. He and John Awoke have been dealing with a little bit of injury, but both of these guys should be good to go in this game. They're a little bit smaller than they have been in past years. Xavier Fitch, along with Benil Basil, have been really your main big men. Both of these guys have been able to give you about 4.5 to 5 rebounds per game. And on the other side, you got a Georgetown team that it really does feel like they're gelling. They had a nice win over Clemson about a week or so ago. KJ Lewis, who comes over from Arizona, he's been a man, 19 points, 7 boards. And for this Georgetown team, they're shooting just 23.5% from three. We should see some positivity there. They've been able to do a nice job down low, top 25 team in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage. And the one thing that Georgetown is really doing as well, taking care of the ball. Only about 7.5 turnovers per game. They bring in someone like Deshaun Harris-Smith, who was a big giant flopperoonie over at Maryland after being a highly touted recruit. He's been able to give the team some production. The 7-footer Vincent Ayuchuku, who just dealt with a lot of things with that heart arrhythmia situation a few years ago over at USC. He's come in, he's been able to give the team a little bit of rebounding, but I do think that Wagner slows this thing down to a crawl. I think that they make this as sloppy as humanly possible. Now, Wagner, they themselves are a team that's had a little bit of a tough time taking care of the ball. 15 turnovers per game despite being outside the top 3 in terms of total possessions per game, and the Wagner 40% 3-point shooting should regress a little bit, but I do think that Wagner does a little bit of a better job inside than what they have to begin the season to just barely be able to hold it in there. So I told 134.5. I like the under and 23 plus here with Wagner 306-557, 306-558. It is Le Moyne, and they're going to be playing us at Fairfield. Fairfield is a 1.5 point favorite on the road, and your total on this game between 151.5 to 152.5, and I did set a line here of 2, so I'm going to be willing to lay the 1.5 with Fairfield. Been very impressed by what I've seen out of the Sags this season. They go on the road to begin the season. They very nearly knock off Penn State, and you've been able to get good production out of Braden Sparks and Juice Turner down for what? In the backcourt. These two guys have been able to combine for about 30 points per contest. Not necessarily the world's greatest facilitation, with Sparks being the main facilitator with about 3 assists per game, but down low, you've got weapons upon weapons. Down low with this is going to be a tough name, Declan Wutcher-Fenning, who's been able to give you about 9 points, 7 boards, and a block per contest, and then Brandon Benjamin, he's been able to give you a block and a half. He's been rock solid for this team as well. They've got quite a bit of size, and they haven't even been able to get Cam Estevez going. He's been dealing with a little bit of injury. He's missed 2 games. He was a pretty rock solid scorer over at Rhode Island the last few seasons, and on the other end, you've got a bunch in Le Moyne that has been, in my opinion, a pleasant surprise, as they don't return a ton from a season ago. Main guy that they've got back has been Trent Mascaro, who's been able to give you 13 points, 2.5 assists per game. You've had Tennessee Rainwater, that's his actual name, coming on over from Utah Tech to be able to give this team a little bit of versatility at 6'6". Shiloh Jackson, he's someone that's saying 6'9", comes in from Texas A&M Corpus Christi. He's been able to help out a team that just really hasn't had a lot of size over the last few seasons. His 7.5 rebounds, block and a half per contest, that's been very big in helping right the ship for a Le Moyne team that very nearly knocked off Xavier on the road to begin the season. Still not necessarily an ideal team. They're outside the top 300 in terms of generating second chances, so that's a big reason why I did have to set my total here at a 150. I'm going to be in on the under, despite the fact that you've got a Le Moyne team that they're certainly not playing at warp speed or anything like that, but they are a little bit more of a team that is going to be looking to push a bit of pace. This is a Le Moyne team that, with their defense, has been just 264th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, while Fairfield has been more around about 120th for this Fairfield squad. Last year, they were outside the top 300 in terms of total possessions per game. Not as though they're going to be gunning it this year, but it does feel like they're looking to be able to push this a little bit more tempo. Right now, they're clocking in more in that neighborhood, about 155th in the country in terms of total possessions per game, but you've had Dimitri Moss do a solid job as well for this Le Moyne team. He's come in, he's been able to give you 4.5 assists, not necessarily too much of a score, and has dealt with quite a bit of injury, so that has been really hurting this team, and he's probably going to be out of the fold in this game as he's missed the last few games, so I did have to downgrade Le Moyne a little bit with that regard. That means that you have a little bit more on the plate of someone like a Ja'Kai Sanders, who he's been able to get the team 11.5 points, comes in from St. Peter's, but not necessarily as much of a primary ball handler, so did set my line at 2, going to be willing to lay with Fairfield, and set a total here of a 150. I'm in on the under, 306-559, 306-560. Harvard and Boston U do battle. This is going to be a neutral court game out there at Mohegan Sun, and with Harvard, they're a 3.5 point favorite, 137.5 to 138 is the total, and I said Harvard as a 5-point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay the number. For Harvard, you bring back your top 3 scorers from the season ago, including Robert Hinton, who's been hitting it hard. Last year gave the team 15.5 points per contest. He's right now only giving you about 11.5 points per game, but we've seen Chandler Piggy and Thomas Beatties, the other 2 main guys that returned from the season ago, really ascend with being able to combine for about 29 points per game. Beatties is right now shooting 68% from 3-point range. That is going to be going downward a little bit, but overall, this is a Harvard team that they appear to be very much improved from the fact that they were outside the top 200 in terms of points scored on a per possession basis last year. Need to find a way to be able to give themselves more second chances. They're outside the top 320 in terms of their offensive rebound percentage, but doing a good job of being able to guard the arc. They're allowing teams to shoot only about 28% from 3. Now you get a neutral court game against a Boston U team that it's been an almighty struggle for them on offense the last few seasons, and right now one of their main big men in Otto Landrum is dealing with an injury. Now you've got Michael Aaron McNair, who's been able to do a nice job in the backcourt, 14 points, 4 boards, 3 assists. Last year shot 40% from 3. He's back there this season, but for Boston U last year, they were well outside the top 300 in terms of their free throw shooting percentage. They always do a nice job on the glass. Last year, they were a top 40 team with regards to their defensive rebound percentage. They're not allowing a lot of second chances this year, and currently they're allowing teams to shoot over 40% from 3. We should see that tick downward. Typically, this is a Boston U team that finds themselves clocking in outside the top 275 in terms of total possessions per game, and they're even lower than that this year at 357th. Harvard not necessarily gunning it either at 352nd, so I think that you get a little bit more of a controlled game. Could be close enough for late game fouling. Did set my total at 137, but here at 137.5, 138, I'm in on the under end. With Harvard, I think that their experience wins out. I'm willing to lay the number, set them as a 5-point favorite. 365-61, 365-62. NC Central is on the road against Dayton, and Dayton does find themselves as 28 to 28.5 point favorites, 148 to 148.5 is the total, and with Dayton, I did set them as a favorite of 24 points. Going to be willing to take the points with NC Central. Now, NC Central last year just got completely dump trucked down low. They were outside the top 350 in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage, but have always been a pretty solid team in terms of generating turnovers. Last year, top 25 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis. They're generating about 15 turnovers once again this season. They had to turn over much of that backcourt from a season ago, but you got Kalichi Ogagero, who's been able to give you 5 points, 4 boards per contest, good versatility there, and then Takeo Carpenter. He's a guy that began his career over at Austin P last season for the Governators. He was able to give that team 4.5 points, shot in the mid-30s from 3-point. He's been able to give them some nice toughness in the backcourt, but it's been Gage Lattimore who's really been the top scorer. He comes on up from the non-D1 ranks. Right now, he's averaging 21.5 points per contest. Don't know how much of a mainstay that's going to be, but on the other end, you've got a Dayton squad that might be in a little bit of a look-ahead spot. They were able to get that nice win over Marquette a few days ago, and that's a Marquette team that's not looking great, to say the least. And for Dayton, they're certainly going to have the size advantage down low, but they're now pulling in there a lot of offensive rebounds. They're well outside the top 300 in terms of percentage of their missed shots that result in an offensive rebound, though they are a top 80 team with regards to their 2-point shooting percentage. 7'1" Emil Latang has been able to give you 13 points. He's actually able to pop it from 3 at about 35%, 7.5 rebounds per game, but outside that, not necessarily a ton of rebounding. Keontae Jones has versatility coming in from CISA, 9 points, about 5 rebounds per contest. Right now, shooting 83% from 3. Again, that'll be going downward, though. The team as a collective only shooting 30.5% from 3. We should see that going up, but with Malachi Smith out of the fold, they have been turning the ball over just a little bit more this season, but they've also embraced generating more turnovers. This is a Dayton team that is a top 45 squad in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis. A little bit more mid-tempo this year, 174th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. NC Central, traditionally a relatively slow team, 307, so makes for an interesting total here. I did set mine at a 148. I do think that you're going to get some solid efficiency out of Dayton, but just with too many turnovers, I do like the under, and I'm going to be willing to take those points with NC Central. 306-563, 306-564. St. Peter's is going to be playing against the UMass Lowell. Lowell is a 6.5 to a 7-point dog. 153.5 is the total, and I set a total here of 142.5. I'm in on the under. Now, right now, St. Peter's is outside the top 300 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, but last 2 seasons they were a top 65 team on defense, and now they get to go against the UMass Lowell team that lost darn near everyone from last year, and they're outside the top 295 in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. I do think that order is going to be restored, especially with bringing back Bryce Eaton and Brett Bland from that backcourt a season ago. Neither of these guys were like feature scorers or anything like that, but both were nice rotational pieces, especially Eaton, who was able to give that team 11 points, 2.5 assists, shot 37.5% from 3-point range. Down low, you lose Mohamed so they don't have as much size as they have in past seasons, but you still been able to get right around about 5 boards per contest out of Jakai Gupton, who he provides 6'7" versatility for this team. You've been able to get some good production as well out of TJ Robinson, who's been able to supply 11.5 points per game, and then the transfer transfer from Rider, Adekombe Bakare. He's been able to do a nice job in terms of helping lead this backcourt as well with about 8 points, shooting from three-point range in that neighborhood about 35% from the outside. So that's been pretty rock solid. And for Massachusetts Lowell, this has been a tough team in terms of being able to take care of the balls. Right now, they're turning the ball over 14.5 times per game. They just have not been able to find that go-to scorer right now, as J.J. Massaquoi has been able to give you 15 points per game, but not a guy that's really going to pop it from three-point range. It's a UMass Lowell team that's been actually even worse on defense. They're outside the top 355 in terms of points allowed on a per-possession basis. They're not doing a great job of hitting the glass. When these Massachusetts Lowell teams have been able to rise up, it's been because of their rebounding. Only have one guy in Austin Green who's been able to give you more than 5 rebounds per game. Comes in as a 6'8", little bit of a joker player from Texas State, but has not really been able to ascend in terms of his three-point shooting. I do think that St. Peter's traditionally a team that's outside the top 300 in terms of total possessions per game, slows it down and just holds down a UMass Lowell team that is having a tough time on offense and having a even tougher time on defense. I told 142.5. I like the under, and I'm going to be willing to lay it with St. Peter's, set them as a 10.5 point favorite. 36.565, 36.566. It is Oklahoma State. They play us in Nicholls, and Nicholls does find themselves as a sizable underdog of 24.5 points. 162.5 to 163.5 is the total, and with Nicholls, I did set them here as an underdog of 24 points. So now that we've gotten north of 24, that does become my buy point on them, as the one thing that Nicholls does a pretty solid job of is generate turnovers. Right now, 77th in the country in terms of turnovers forced on a per-possession basis, but boy, this offense is rough. They're about 337th in the country in terms of points scored on a per-possession basis, shooting 27% from three. They lost their top 3 scorers from a season ago, so Trey English, who's been primarily a facilitator, he's having to take ownership of the offense. 2.5 assists, 3.5 turnovers per game. He is supplying 14 points per game, but he's shooting less than 30% from three-point range. Jalen Searles, he's one of the main guys that returns. He's been able to supply about 11 points per game, but you also do have an undersized team. You don't have a single guy on this roster for Nicholls right now that's giving you over 5 rebounds per game. I do like the fact that you bring in Christian Winborn. He was a pretty rock solid player over at Iona and St. Joe's over the last few seasons, but he doesn't necessarily have ideal size, so Oklahoma State should be able to take it to them down low. And Oklahoma State has been able to rise into the top 100 in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, and under Steve Lutz, this is going to be a team that very much looks to gun it for Steve Lutz. He's done that at every place where he has been in Oklahoma State right now, 9th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. You've got a Nicholls team that I think is going to be more mid-tempo when it's all said and done, but for this Oklahoma State team, they've also had a little bit of tough time taking care of the ball outside the top 200 in terms of turnovers on a per-possession basis, despite the fact that you've got Coleman squared and Isaiah Coleman and Christian Coleman combined for about 24 points per contest. So we have seen Jalen Curry be able to give the team 10 points, 5 boards, 4 assists, but he's been dealing with a little bit of injury. Now, they're getting back Anthony Royo dealt with injury to begin the season. He's had 30 points in the first 2 games that he's played in, and Victorious Miller's come over from LSU. He's been amazing, 20.5 points. He's from three-point range, been able to dial it up at over 50%. Do think that we see a little bit of fall off there. Oklahoma State should very much be able to pound the boards and do a nice job there, but the 15 turnovers per game are a little bit concerning, and I think that that'll be just enough for Nicholls to hold in there, and a little bit of a lower scoring game. I did set my total 152, like the under, and anything above 24 here with Nicholls. 3-6-5-67, 3-6-5-68. Binghamton is going to be playing against Maryland Eastern Shore. This is a neutral court game, as both of these teams played yesterday, but that said, with Binghamton 3-point favorites, still on this game. Open up at a 135.5, pile driven down to a 131.5. I actually do like the over, despite the fact that you've got 2 teams that are currently outside the top 280 in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, but I'm going to be willing to lay it with Binghamton. Now, with Binghamton, they allow for a lot of clean possessions, well outside the top 300 in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, and that's big because UMass Lowell is right now averaging about 6 points fewer per 100 possessions and the next least efficient offense in all of college basketball, and they currently lead the country in terms of most turnovers per possession of any team in the country. But I think that Binghamton is really going to be able to win this battle from within. Demetrius Lilly, he's come in, he's been able to give the team over 16 points, 11 rebounds per game after he was a rock solid big man over at LaSalle last season. Jackson Mangini needs to get online, entered into yesterday averaging 8.5 points per contest after this was a guy that when he was at Stone Hill 2 seasons ago, he was able to be one of the main scorers there. He was giving that team 11.5 points, a steal and a half per contest, and then Jeremiah Quigley, who began his career over at Iona, just did not see any playing time over at George Mason last season. He's come in, he's been able to give the team 13 points, 7 assists per contest, and for this Maryland Eastern Shore team, they've actually been a respectable defense inside the top 225 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. They've been able to generate about 13 turnovers per game, but you did not have anyone entering into yesterday with more than 8.7 points per game. Joseph Lusadro has been able to give you about 9 points per game, and actually is shooting 56% from 3, but as a collective, it's a bunch that has to pick up the pieces after losing KJ Shaw in the backcourt from a season ago. You got Christopher flipping down low. He was able to give the team 5 boards per contest last season, and he hasn't quite been able to duplicate that, but he's giving you a little bit of scoring down low. That said, I do think that for Binghamton, with having Lilly in the post, I think that they are going to be able to dominate this game, and I think that is going to be an almighty struggle for Maryland Eastern Shore to be able to take care of the ball. I do think that Binghamton is not necessarily a team that generates a lot of turnovers, but I think that they just throw the ball away themselves. But I do think that being able to take advantage is going to be this Binghamton team. So with Binghamton, I set them as a 9.5-point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay the number and do like the over. I did set my total at a 135.5 through a 65.69 through a 65.70. You've got Eastern Kentucky, and they are going to be playing host to Mercer, and Mercer does find themselves as a mid-tier underdog here right now. With Mercer, you're catching 2.5 to 3.5 points. It's on game between 164.5 to a 166.5, and I did set a total of a 160.5. I'm in on the under for Mercer. This is a team that under Ryan Ritter, I do think that they're going to be looking to run quite a bit more for Mercer. In terms of total possessions per game, they really haven't kicked it into warp speed yet. 116th in all of college basketball in Eastern Kentucky. This is always a team that they like to play with a lot of pace. Currently 29th in the country in terms of total possessions per game, and Eastern Kentucky's forte is generating turnovers. Last year, top 75 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, and they do have to go up against a Mercer team that has seen a lot of transition with regards to backcourt. Even with that, they've only turned the ball over 11 times per game, so it has been very big that the George Mason transfer and Baraka Okoji has been able to do a nice job, give the team 15 points, 5 assists, while turning the ball over less than 3 times per contest. You've got Zaire Williams, who he was a part of Wagner last season. He was their main scorer with about 13 points per game. He's been able to do a nice job in terms of giving the team some defensive tenacity with about a steal and a half per contest. And Brody Shoulders, he's the main returner from the season ago. Shoulders last year, 5.5 points, 5.5 boards. He's up to 8 points, nearly 10 rebounds, and nearly 3 steals per game. So he's been rock solid there. This is a Mercer team that they themselves are currently a top 75 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, but they're shooting less than 30% from 3-point. That's really the way that you unravel this Eastern Kentucky team. They're typically outside the top 300 in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage, and for Eastern Kentucky, they do have a guy with a lot of versatility in Montavious Merrick, who's been able to supply 14 points, 7 boards at 6'8". He's been able to generate a little bit over a steal per contest. Not necessarily a guy that's going to pop it and lock it from 3, but you've got Turner Buttrey, who's back in the system after he's been a high 33-point shooter throughout his career. Juan Cranford over at St. Francis, Pennsylvania. He was able to give that team 11 points per game 8 seasons ago. And then Austin Ball began his career over at George Mason, just really didn't see a lot of minutes a few seasons ago, went down to the non-D1 ranks. He has resurfaced. He's been able to shoot in the mid-30s from 3-point range. He's given this team 12 points per contest. This is an Eastern Kentucky team that's back to their old tricks in terms of generating turnovers, and typically with this bunch, they're pretty good in terms of being able to block shots, and right now you've got multiple players in Merrick along with Jalen Cooper who've been able to give you a little bit of a block per contest, so I do think that Eastern Kentucky going to be the stronger team inside. It's an Eastern Kentucky team that's looking to let it fly. Right now they're only shooting about 32% from 3, but they've attempted more 3-point shots than 2-point shots, and with this Mercer team being outside the top 200 the last 2 seasons in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage, I think that Eastern Kentucky gets it done in a game that involves a lot of turnovers, so maybe my total 160.5, like the under, and with Eastern Kentucky, want to lay up to 6 with them. 36.571, 36.572. Long Island is going to be on the road against Illinois, and Illinois finds themselves as a very big size favorite here of 33 to 34.5 points. So on scheme is 162.5. Made a line of 32. I'm going to be willing to take the points with Long Island. Now, we saw Tomislav Ivicic be able to return in that game against Alabama, but he was quite limited. I would not be surprised if Illinois really eases him back into things. No reason to get him hurt in a game against Long Island, but that said, they're still going to be able to dump truck this Long Island team on the glass. You've got David Marocic, who's been able to give you 17 points, 12 boards, a nice international man of mystery. Andrei Stojakovic, who comes on over from Cal. He's been able to supply 17 points per game. It's a Illinois team that's improved with their 3-point shooting from a season ago. Last year outside the top 75 with that regard. Still not necessarily amazing, even though Kylan Boswell has been much better on offense, 19 points, 5 boards per contest. And then with this Long Island unit, you've got Isaiah Miranda down low, a 7'1" big man that is looking to be able to find his footing after being a top 250 recruit of NC State and Oklahoma State. But I do think that Greg Gecko Gordon and Malachi Davis in the backcourt will be able to combine for 27 points per game, keep this team relatively lively. Davis, not necessarily a great 3-point shooter, but we also have a guy in Jamal Fuller in the backcourt, who he last year was able to shoot in the mid-30s from three-point range. I know that he's been a little bit banged up, but should be all good to go in this one. He played in their game a few nights ago against Fordham, and for Long Island, they've been able to ascend with that three-point shooting at 35%. Need to do a better job than shooting 60% on the free throw line. That has very much been killing them. I do think that goes northward as the season goes along, but Chadrick Lassu, who was that top rebounder a season ago with 6+ boards, he's been taking a little bit of a setback this season. I think that he's able to give you a little bit more, and AJ Neal has been nowhere to be found for this team, but that said, for this Long Island team, I do think that they're looking to push a little bit more tempo after they were outside the top 290 in terms of total possessions per game a season ago, but I do think that the Illinois defense is going to be pretty sturdy here, but again, with the VSIN dealing with that little bit of ailment, I think that that's just enough for Long Island to be able to hold in there. Somehow line at 32, so taking the points with Long Island, and I'm going to be in on this total under as well. Through a 6.573, through a 6.574, Cal State Bakersfield. Meet me for the Road Runners, playoffs to Mississippi Valley State. Delta Devils are 24 to 24.5 point dogs. 140.5 is the total line. Set my line at 21. Give me the points here with Mississippi Valley State, who looked a little bit more promising out there on the island. And the big reason why is that they bring in a guy by the name of Michael James, who has been actually very good for this Mississippi Valley State team. He's a bona fide stud. 19 points, 4 boards, 2.5 assists per game. And Daniel Mayfield, 6'8", big man. He's not necessarily going to give you a whole bunch of three-point shooting, but on the few threes that he's taken, he's shooting 45% from three, 14.6 half boards per contest. Now, with Mississippi Valley State still well outside the top 3 in terms of both points scored and points allowed on a per possession basis, are one of the worst rebound rate teams in all of college basketball. Shooting, though, 82% of the free throw line. That's actually very good. And for Bakersfield, this is a team that's in all sorts of just chaos after they lost their coach in Rod Barnes very late in the offseason. Yeah, the trafficking situation, that's just not great, to say the least. They did retain the roster from a season ago, but it's a very top-heavy team right now. You've had C.J. Hardy be able to be Mr. Do-It-All with 17 points, 4 boards, 3 assists per contest, and currently is letting it fly at 54% from 3. It was a good three-point shooter last year, but that's not going to be maintaining. And then down low, you've had A.J. George, who is a 6'6" combo player that 2 years ago at Long Beach State averaged 12 points per game. And Ron Jessamy, 6'8" big man, comes in from Tennessee State, where a season ago he was able to be a nice post presence with 9 points, 6 boards, a little bit of a block per contest. So he's been able to give them some rough and tumble. But that said, outside of your main starting 5, you don't have a single guy that's averaging more than 3.2 points per game. And Mississippi Valley State, they're doing a little bit more of a respectable job on defense after they were just dead stinking last in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. And last few seasons, Mississippi Valley State has been outside the top 275 in terms of total possessions per game. They have sped themselves up quite a bit this year. They're now 106th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Bakersfield, with having an interim coaching regime, they're more of a mid-tempo team, so set a total of 145. I like the over and the points here with Mississippi Valley State. 3-6-5-75, 3-6-5-76. You've got Howard and Niagara playing from Cameron Indoor Stadium. This is the Duke multi-team event, so this game is presently off the board since both of these teams, well, they had some action on Friday, especially Niagara. But that said, I've got my handicap. I did set a total here of a 143.5, so 143 or less, and on the over, 144 or higher the under. And with Howard, made them a 7.5 point favorite. 7 or less, going to be one to lay with Howard. 8 or more, going to be taking the points from Niagara. I do think that Niagara is going to fare a little bit better on offense than they did against our good friends Duke yesterday, as they lost that game 100-42. And for Niagara, it's not great to say the least. They lost pretty much 9 out of their top 10 scores from the season ago. Lone over is Justin Page, who's done an okay job being able to give this team about 12.5 points per contest. And typically for Niagara, this is a rock-solid three-point shooting team, always has been under Greg Paulus, and they've left something to be desired on glass. Boy, are they leaving something to be desired on glass outside the top 3 with regards to rebound percentage. Reggie Padome, who comes over from the non-D1 ranks, he's been able to give you about 5 rebounds per game, but now it's a squad with everything that we saw yesterday that's been pretty pedestrian with their three-point shooting. And Bryce Howard is just going to be the top player in this game. For 2 years ago at Howard, he was giving that team 15-plus points per contest, dealt with injury last season. He has resurfaced, and he's right now supplying 22.5 points, 7.5 boards, 3.5 assists per game. Now he needs a little bit more help. Cam Gillis, he comes over from the Patriot League from Lehigh. He was a nice double-figure scorer over there. They didn't bring over quite as much firepower in the transfer portal as they have in past seasons, but got a guy in Eddie Holland who I think has a little bit of upside. He was over at Penn 2 seasons ago, was dealing with injury last season, but he gave that team 2 years ago about 6 points, 3 boards. Has been a traditional about 30% three-point shooter, but he should be able to give this team a little bit of versatility versatility at 6'6", and then you've had Osei Okoji. He's been able to come in after last few seasons. He was really just a little bit more of an ancillary guy that would give you like 4 to 4.5 points per game and dealt with some injuries. He's been able to do a nice job, give the team a little bit of spark with 7 points per game. Howard is a little bit undersized, but Niagara, they are always very, very undersized. And with Danilis Kavakais, who comes over from Lithuania, give you a 6'10" frame, I do think that Howard going to be able to do a rock solid job down low. And Howard, traditionally an up-tempo team, Niagara is a very slow and controlled team, but Howard has dialed it back this year, currently outside the top 275. In terms of total possessions per game, I think they speed it up a little bit more. 7 or less willing to lay with Howard, 8 or more taking the points with Niagara, and then 143 or less, and on the over, 144 or higher the under. 36-577, 36-578. Chattanooga is going to be playing us to North Alabama. North Alabama finds themselves as 4.5 to 5.5 point dogs. 154.5 is the total, and I did set a line of 2.5. I'm going to be willing to take those points with North Alabama. North Alabama should be able to win the battle down low, as you've got Cornelius Williams back from the season ago after he gave the team 9+ rebounds per game. Now he's fighting them with 12+ boards per contest. Chattanooga is just going to have no response for that. They don't have a single guy down low that is giving you over 5 rebounds per game. Sebastian Hartman, I thought, was going to be able to take some strides forward after being at Eastern Washington last year, giving that team 9.5 points, shot 36% from 3, and instead he's only been able to give the team right around about 7.5 points per contest. It's actually been Jordan Frinson, who he comes over as a non-D1 transfer. He's been able to give the team 13 points per game, who's been the main scorer, and under this Dan Earl style, this is going to be a team that loves to bomb it from 3. Year in and year out, they're a top 50 team in terms of percentage of their shots that come from 3, and right now they're attempting over 54% of their field goal attempts from 3-point range, but they're shooting 34.5% from 3, which is not a terrible number, but they need it to be a little bit higher because they're just not grabbing any offensive rebounds right now. They are getting completely outgunned there. They're outside the top 300 in terms of percentage of their missed shots that result in an offensive rebound, and with North Alabama additionally having back in the fold Dallas Howell, who he was pretty much missing for the entirety of the year last year at 6'7", 2 seasons ago, shot nearly 40% from 3, gave that team 9+ points per contest. That's big. And then Kevin De Kozovic, he's been able to come in. He's been able to give you 14 points per game. Love what he's able to bring to the table for this team. It is a North Alabama team that's looking for a little bit more facilitation. They lost much of their backcourt from a season ago, but still doing a solid job taking care of the ball. Only about 11 turnovers per game, and with the way that North Alabama has the big size advantage inside, I do think that they hold in there in a game where I think that Chattanooga is going to have a tough time being able to find good looks from 3-point range. So I did set my total here at a 152.5. I'm going to be in on the under and the points with North Alabama. 36-579, 36-580. Lipscomb is going to be playing us with West Carolina. Western Carolina is a underdog of 2.5 points. 154.5 to 156 is the total, and I set a line of 1.5. So I'm going to be willing to take the points with Western Carolina. They brought back a lot of their rock solid pieces from a season ago. Now Western Carolina, last year they were well outside the top 300 in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis on offense. They have still been having a tough time taking care of the ball this year with 14.5 turnovers per game, but much better at generating turnovers this year. They're a top 125 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, and you bring back 2 rock solid scorers from his season ago. Marcus Kell, of course, Dansbury, they've been able to combine for 29 points per game, shooting about 32 to 33% from 3-point range, but they're both also giving you over 4.5 rebounds per game. And then Julian Sawarmo, he was a really good guard over at Gardner-Webb 2 seasons ago, just did not see any playing time over at East Carolina last season. He has resurfaced. He's been able to give this team 14 points, 2.5 assists, much more direction than what you had last season when there really was not a point guard. And on the flip side, you've got a Lipscomb team that's in quite a bit of transition. They lose their coach Lenny Acuff in the offseason. They hire on Kevin Carroll, who was very rock solid at the Division II ranks, but he maintained a few of the big men from a season ago. 6'10" Charlie Williams and Grant Asman, they're holdovers with the program, with Asman being right now your top scorer with 6 boards, 12.5 points per game, and Williams, he's been able to give you 8.5 points per contest, and Williams is capable of popping it from 3-point range. The problem is he's only shooting about 22% from the outside, and Lipscomb just has not been able to get a lot of 3-point shooting thus far. They're shooting less than 30% from 3-point range as a collective. Ross Caladino, he comes over after he began his career at Wisconsin, and he just did not see a lot of minutes. He was glued to the bench last year, and this season he's been able to rise up, be able to give the team about 12 points per game, and you do have a nice go-to facilitator, Mateo Esmeraldo, who's been able to give you 6 assists per game, and Lipscomb is doing a pretty solid job in terms of the turnover battle themselves. They've been a top 140 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, but they're also outside the top 225 with regards to the opponent's 2-point shooting percentage, and I do think that this is going to be a Lipscomb bunch that's going to have a tough time with the Western Carolina just overall versatility. I did set my line here at a 1.5, so at 2+, won't take the points with Western Carolina, made a total of 155.5, so I'm going to be in on the 154.5 that I'm seeing to the over. 306.581, 306.582. Gardner-Webb is on the road against Richmond. Richmond is a 20.5 to a 21-point favorite. 154.5 to a 155 is the total line. Set Gardner-Webb is a 16-point dog. I'm going to be willing to take the points. Now, Gardner-Webb has already lost to a non-Division I team thus far this season, and they're still in search of their first win of the season. That's not great, to say the least. Under Jeremy Luther, things have been just not good, but that said, I do think that the backcourt is starting to find their footing. Ace Tolbert, who was very good over at St. Francis of Pennsylvania a few seasons ago, he's been able to give out 2.5 assists per game. You've got a guy in Jacob Hudson, who's in year number 2 of the system. He's been able to supply 13 points, 6.5 boards. Now, for Gardner-Webb, traditionally, this would be a rock-solid team down low, but they really have a lack of size outside of Jacob Hogarth, who's been able to give the team a little bit over 8 rebounds per game, but he and Hudson are right now the lone 2 guys on the roster that give you over 3 rebounds per game, but Richmond traditionally has been a unit that has not been able to do a great job in terms of grabbing offensive rebounds. I do like Jonathan Beagle's able to give you 6.5 boards, 11 points per game, and then Michael Wallace has been able to give you 7.5 rebounds per game. Those are really the lone 2 guys that give you over 4.5 rebounds per game for this team as well, though. So this should be a spot where this Gardner-Webb team does an okay job there. Now for this Richmond team, they've been a little bit better on the offensive glass, but they're also not allowing teams to be able to grab second and third chances. They've been a top 50 team in terms of defensive rebound percentage, but for this Richmond team, they were last year outside the top 300 in terms of three-point shooting percentage. They're shooting just 30.4% from distance right now. They bring in AJ Lopez. He was solid over at Maine last season. For that Maine bunch, he was able to give them 14.5 points, 2 boards, shot 40% from 3. He's been really cold with regards to his three-point shooting. You've had Aiden Albright, he's been able to come in, give the team 13 points per contest, but Augustus Romaglu, who began his career over at UConn, he's been able to give you 4.5 rebounds per game, but no scoring whatsoever. Mikkel Tyne is someone that has been in the system for a few seasons. Last year, 9.5 points per game, but he's actually taken a little bit of setback this season with Richmond. They've been more of a mid-tempo team this season, but last year they were more on 335th in terms of total possessions per game. I do think that they look to slow things down a little bit more, and I think that they get the job done, but I think both of these offenses struggle. So I may total 146. I'm in on the under, and the points with Gardner-Webb set them as a 16-point dog. 306.583, 306.584. Stetson is playing us at VMI, and VMI finds themselves as a road favorite of 2 to 3.5 points. So on this game between 149.5 to 150.5, and I said VMI is a 4-point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay the small number for Stetson. They've been looking to crank up their tempo a little bit more. When Donnie Jones really had things going, they were outside the top 275 in terms of total possessions per game. You do bring back Jamie Phillips from a season ago. That helps out the backcourt. He's been able to give the team 14 points, 6 boards per contest, but you really don't have a lot of size. This team has been getting just completely bludgeoned in terms of just taking care of the ball. They're turning the ball over 15 times per contest because they just really don't have anyone outside of Calvin Sermons to be able to handle the ball, and Sermons is just not a scorer. He's only able to give you about 5 points per contest. There's not a lot of three-point shooting outside of Jamie Phillips, and this is a team that's built around really good three-point shooting. Right now, they're shooting 32.5% as a collective from three-pointers. Now, Jake Johnson, Alex Doyle, they've both been able to shoot over 40% from 3. Doyle's right now giving you about 6 points per contest after he just did not see a lot of minutes last season. Jake Johnson, he's a guy that comes up from the non-D1 ranks, only about 7.5 points per game out of him. And for VMI, I love what you're right now getting out of TJ Johnson. Johnson has been in the program for multiple years, 20.5 points, 8.5 boards, 2 assists per game as a 6'6", do-it-all sort of player. VMI shooting in the mid-30s from three-point range with having a main facilitator in Taden Yiziglu, who doesn't give you much scoring with about 6 points per game, but 2 steals, 4.5 assists per game. He's right now making winning plays for this team. It is a VMI team that has a little bit outsized down low outside of Johnson. You really don't have a ton with regards to your size, but Cal Liston has been able to give you 8 points, 4 boards per contest, and really like the game of AJ Clark. He's been in the program for multiple years. He's been able to pull in their 7.5 rebounds as a 6'4", a little bit of a just undersized guy in terms of being able to hit it down low, but has been able to do a nice job in terms of being able to give this team a little bit of rebounding. Last year, he generated for the team 2 steals per contest, and this is a VMI team that has been able to do a pretty rock solid job in terms of the turnover battle. Right now, they're a top 175 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, and I think that they get the job done against a Stetson team that really is looking to be able to bomb it from 3, and they just have not been able to do so. But I do think that the Stetson defense, them being outside the top 300 in terms of total points allowed on a per possession basis, is going to allow you to get the over. So in on the over, so my total 156, and one to lay with VMI, 306,585, 306,586. VCU plays us at Coppin St. Coppin St, an underdog of 31 to 32.5 points, 150 to 151.5 is the total, and set a total of 146.5. I'm going to be in on the under. I just don't think that Coppin St does their part with this total. Last year, they were 363rd in the country in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. A little bit better this year, but still well outside the top 300 with that regard, and they've already lost a game 150 to South Florida this season, and you've had Demetrius Hall be able to give you about 11.6 boards per contest for this Coppin St team, but also not much size with this team. Like, you've got 6'9" Tyler Koenig, who's been able to give you about 4.5 rebounds per game, but Hall's the only guy that gives you over 4.5 rebounds per game, so they're getting absolutely dump trucked on the glass right now. It's a Coppin St team that is shooting 26.5% from three, and there's no reason to think that's going to be going northward. Outside the top 300 in terms of ball security, they don't really have a main facilitator, and for VCU, you do have a squad that was able to have a nice close call against NC State a few days ago, and you do have a lot of weapons around the outside. You don't have as much down low, but Barry Evans is a guy with versatility. Follows Phil Martelli Jr. on over from Bryan, 10 points, 6 boards, 3.5 assists per contest, and Laser Djokovic at 6'10", 5 rebounds, and is able to pop it from 3-point range. It's really just a whole square than some of its parts collective right now for VCUS. JD Tracy, he comes over from Oregon. He's been the top scorer of 14 points per game, but you've right now got 6 different guys who have been able to give you at least 7 points per contest. That doesn't include Brandon Jennings, be able to chip in there 3 assists, 4 boards, 8 points per contest. That said, I do think that this summer it's getting just a little bit out of whack. You do have a VCU team that has a lot of moving parts, and as a result, even though they've been good at generating turnovers, they've been a top 100 team with regards to turnovers forced on a per possession basis. Outside the top 200 in terms of their ball security, they've been turning the ball over about 14.5 times per game, and I do think that that costs you both the over and laying just a big number is just going to be a little bit tough with that lack of ball security. So did set my line at 30.5, won't take the points with Coppin St, and I'm going to be in on the under 306,587, 306,588. Now we hit the neutral court games, as this is Southern Indiana, and they're going to be playing against Illinois Chicago. This is from Daytona Beach, and right now with Illinois Chicago, they are a 10-point favorite with this total clocking in at a 155, and I am going to be willing to take the points with Southern Indiana. Southern Indiana, I did set as a 9.5-point underdog, but with Illinois Chicago, they've been able to have some really nice close calls. They had that game on the road against Oregon State where it looked like they were able to pull it out, but they lose that game in a very close fashion, and they held in there against High Point as well. The defense seems to have taken a little bit of a half a step back right now. They're doing a good job with regards to perimeter defense, and they were last season as well. Right now, teams are shooting less than 30% from 3-point range against them, but the 15 turnovers per game on offense have been very costly, and that's a big reason why I just can't back them here. Even though you bring in a guy like a Mikhail Lowry, who was over at Towson last season, and he's been able to help out this team a little bit more down low, 9.7 rebounds per game. And Ahmad Henderson is that main facilitator who's back from his season ago, 3.5 assists, 16.5 points per game, but also 3.5 turnovers per game. And Elijah Crawford, who came on over from BYU, he's been missing due to injury as well. And for Southern Indiana, they've been well outside the top 275 in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. They've had a very tough time in terms of taking care of the ball, but did like the fact that they brought in Trey Thomas, a 16-point per game scorer from Bethune-Cookman in the offseason. They look to be a little bit improved down low as well. You bring in Ola Abajoy, hopefully I said that correct. He was over at Tennessee Tech, Valparaiso, just a lot of different stops. Has never really been a primary scorer at 6'8", but a guy that's always been able to do a solid job playing in there, 3.4 rebounds per game for 3 different schools actually. And then Cardell Bailey, he's someone that began his career over at Maryland Eastern Shore and over with the Shore last season. He was a rock solid piece, part-time starter, 8.5 points, 3.5 boards, shot in the mid-30s from 3 at 6'6". He's providing a little bit of versatility as well, and with this Southern Indiana team, they have been a top 150 team in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage. Now they're giving up a lot of second chances, and they have been not great in terms of being able to guard the 3-point line, but a little bit hit or miss with regards to the Illinois-Chicago 3-point shooting as well. It is a bunch in Southern Indiana that's been pretty average in terms of generating turnovers as well, so leads to an interesting circumstance. I did say till you're at a 153.5. I think that both of these teams are going to be turning the ball over a little bit more, and do recognize that Illinois-Chicago looking to play a little bit more up-tempo. They're up to about 183rd in terms of total possessions per game, but this is also a Southern Indiana team that I think slows down a little bit from their current pace of 28th in the country in terms of total possessions per game, so in on the under and the points with Southern Indiana. 306,589, 306,590, and Gardner Word is going to be playing against High Point. High Point hopes to not be a low point as 11.5 to 12-point favorites over there in Florida, and the last game is 161.5. set a total of a 147. I'm going to be in on the under. You've got an Incarnate Word team that's well outside the top 300 in terms of total possessions per game, and it's not like this is a High Point team that's ever really run it and gunned it. I recognize that they had a coaching change in the offseason, but they did say in-house with regards to the coaching change with Alan Huss being able to take over, and with High Point right now in terms of total possessions per game, they're a skoja a bit faster than they were a season ago, but I mean, really what they're doing is taking care of the ball. They're a top 10 team in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis, and they're just executing their stuff offensively. Really, both of these teams are. As Incarnate Word is shooting in the high 30s from three-point range, you've got Davion Bailey back after he began his career over at Ball State, 15-plus points, over 3 assists per contest. High Point, 41st in the country in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. Incarnate Word more around about 179th, but you do have a guy in Jordan Pike that I really like. He's back from a season ago. He last year was able to give the team 5-plus boards per contest at 6'7". He's been a mid-30s three-point shooter. And Taj Staveski, he comes over from Cleveland State, and he's been all sorts of versatile. 19 points, 6 assists, 6 rebounds. I do think that High Point is going to have their hands full there. And I do think Incarnate Word has a little bit of a drop-off from the fact that they're shooting 39.5% from three-point range, but I mean, even though they're very slow, they are taking care of the ball. They're turning the ball over less than 10 times per contest. Meanwhile, for High Point, they're turning the ball over only about 9 times per game, and they've actually been a top 20 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, and they're only teams to shoot 25.4% from three. Now, we should see some negative regression there, but they brought in pretty much the all-stars of the, shall we say, mid-major ranks. You've got Cameron Fletcher, who began his career over at Xavier, spent some time over at Florida State. He's now fully healthy after dealing with a lot of ailments, 18.5 points, 7.5 rebounds per game. You've got Terry Anderson, who he actually began his career over at Lamar in the Southland, and he, over at Lamar 2 seasons ago, 13.5 points, 6.5 boards, just didn't find a lot of minutes for High Point last season. Now he's been able to ascend, get some more minutes, and then you've got a one-trick pony in Chase Johnson, who he was one of the main holdovers with the coaching change. He's been able to get the team 10 points per game. He really doesn't do anything other than pop threes, but right now he's shooting 44% from three-point range. This is a High Point team that if they do have a kryptonite, they don't grab a lot of second and third chances, so Flynn Cameron, after he takes over for Alan Huss, has been able to do a pretty solid job in terms of just maintaining this team, but you don't have a Jocelyn Bodu like you did 8 seasons ago, so I do think that this is going to be a lower tempo game, so set a total of 147. I'm in on the under, and set my line at 7. I'm going to take those points with Incarnate Word. 306-591, 306-592. It is UT Martin and Prairie View, and this is going to be a neutral court game out there in Pensacola, Florida, with UT Martin a 8.5 point favorite. Total on this game, it is 156.5 with UT Martin. Set them as an 8 point favorite. Here at the 8.5, I'm going to be willing to take the points for Prairie View. This is a team that year in and year out, they're one of the better teams in all of college basketball in terms of generating turnovers. They've actually been in the top 10 in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis 5 out of the last 9 years, and they face off against a UT Martin team that's 360th in ball security. They're turning the ball over well over 17 times per game. For Prairie View, this is going to be a team that gets dump trucked down the class. They're always outside the top 300 with regards to rebound percentage, but Terrion Joseph, who just dealt with injury last season, 2 years ago when he was over at Southern, was averaging 20 points per game. He's been able to provide this team a nice boost. He's been able to supply 19 points per game. You bring back Marcel Bryant, who he last season coming over from Omaha gave the team about 5 rebounds per game, and teach me how to Dougie Young. He's got some good versatility. He was over at Quinnipiac to begin his career. The last 2 seasons over at Quinnipiac was averaging about 6 points, shot in the mid-30s from three-point range. Has a pretty active hand, so like what he's able to bring to the table. Has been dealing with a little bit of injury, though. Likely going to be out of the fold for this game, and that means that more is on the plate of Corey Wells, who's been able to give you about 12 points, 2 steals, an assist and a half per contest. Not really going to let it fly from three-point range, but good versatility, and has been able to give you a little bit of rebounding along with Cyree Lewis, who he was beginning his career over at Western Michigan at 6'9". He's got a little bit of size as well. And then on the other end, you do have a bunch in UT Martin that just has a lot of international men in mystery. I think that they've got guys from either 12 or 13 different countries on this roster, as it's been Drangos Lassou, who's been able to help do a nice job in terms of providing versatility at 6'6", 15 points, 6.5 rebounds per game, and then Adrima Brkušević, he comes over from Serbia. He's been able to give you 20.5 points, 8 rebounds, so you've got a lot of guys that they do a nice job stretching the floor. You just have a bunch of guys that stand like 6'6", 6'8", that are going to be able to bomb it from three-point range, and then Philip Petrovsky has been able to do a nice job in terms of facilitating the offense. Doesn't really give you a lot of scoring at 6.5 points per game, but has been able to give out about 5.5 assists per contest. This has been a UT Martin team that has made up for their turnover woes with the fact that they do a pretty solid job on the glass. They've been a top 75 team with regards to rebound percentage, and right now shooting 39% from 3, while their opponents are shooting 26.5% from 3. I think that that's going to see a little bit of regression and ironing out. This is a Prairie View team that loves to run, and UT Martin, they're a little bit more of a mid-tempo team, but I do think that you're going to be able to get some good scoring. This opened up at a 153.5 with regards to total. Now we're up to a 155.5 to a 156.5. Personally, I would rather take a 155.5 over rather than a 156.5 under. So I'm looking at that over, and I'm going to be looking at the points here at 8.5 plus with Prairie View, and wrap things up with 306.593, 306.594. North Florida and Southern Miss do battle from Pensacola. Right now, Southern Miss are 5.5 to 6 point favorites. 162.5 to 163 is the total line. I did set my line at 6, so I'm going to be willing to lay up to 5.5 with Southern Miss. With Southern Miss, they got out of the Andre Curbelo business, and I think that is very big for them because, man, that guy, even though he puts up good numbers, he really does not help out your roster. But that said, for Southern Miss, it is a team that's still sort of searching for an identity in the backcourt. They haven't been too bad in terms of their turnovers with about 12.5 per contest, and Isaac Tavares has really been the do-it-all scorer for this team. Comes on over from Fresno State. He's right now supplying 20 points, 7.5 boards, 2.5 assists per game, but it's all about who's going to be able to join him and help him out because you've got a very highly touted junior college transfer from a few seasons ago, and Kurt Lewis could never really find minutes over at ETSU, Missouri, and he's with a lot of injuries. He's been able to come in shooting the mid-30s from 3-point, give the team 6.5 points per contest, and Talik Weeks, he's been very rock solid with about 15 points per game, was a very highly touted, shall we say, non-Division I transfer from a few seasons ago as well. It is a team that's going to be leaving a bit of something to be desired down low. You don't necessarily have an ideal size, but that said, they are going up against a North Florida team that, man, this is always a team that's outside the top 275 in terms of rebound percentage. They always love to bomb it from 3. More than 50% of their shots do come from 3-point range, and you lose pretty much 5 of your top 6 scores from a season ago. The main holdover is Cameron Oriole, who last year he was able to give the team like 8 points per game. He's been a career 36% 3-point shooter, so that helps the team out quite a bit, but it's also a team that has been sort of searching for that main point guard because they lost that from a season ago, and right now with this North Florida team, they're just not finding great shots. They're shooting 33% from 3-point range despite the fact that they're taking all of these threes. Now, opponents are shooting just 26% from the outside. A lot of that has been some good variance. They've left guys open for threes that have not been able to knock them down. You saw that in their game against Tennessee that they were able to cover, and the team is averaging a half a block per game down low. That is a bottom 2 mark in all of college basketball. That's not necessarily great, to say the least. So it is a North Florida team that has a lot of guys that stand 6'7", 6'8", but they really don't hit the boards. Nobody that's giving you over 5 rebounds per game. It is a North Florida team that traditionally likes to push the tempo quite a bit as well. This is a North Florida team that, in terms of total possessions per game, as of right now, they're clocking in about 54th in all of college basketball. And for Southern Miss, they've been having a lot of different styles, having Andre Curbelo in the system over the last few seasons. That very much warped them a little bit. They're now about 233rd in the country, so I think that's where they do stand. I did set my total at 164 because you do have a Southern Miss team that's had their defensive woes outside the top 250 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis last year, and they're allowing teams to shoot 35% from 3, but even with Southern Miss not necessarily having ideal size, they should be able to dominate this game down low and get the job done against a rather not great North Florida defense. So I did set my line at 6. I'm going to be willing to lay with Southern Miss, and I'm in on the over as well, and that'll wrap things up for the Saturday edition of Coast to Coast Hoops, part of the VSIN Family Podcast. If you do like hearing from this fine podcast, Coast to Coast Hoops, you're able to subscribe wherever your podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher, and TuneIn. If you have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you do have one of 2 ways to be able to fire those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at GUnit_81. Keep in mind, letters CM, they mean does not matter, so as per usual, please send these into the timeline. And the other way is find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated. And then from there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. And I am with you guys every single day on this podcast, giving you guys tips and analysis on every single game, every single day. So I'll be back with you once again tomorrow. Thank you.
Let's say your small business has a problem, like maybe one of your doggy daycare customers had an accident. You might say something like,
"Doggone it!
Hi, Chihuahua!"
Holy schnauzers.
But if you need someone who can actually help, just say,
"Like a good neighbor, State Farm is there."
And get help filing a claim from your local State Farm agent. For your small business insurance needs, like a good neighbor, State Farm is there.
With Sylvania, seeing better while driving at night starts with you. Because headlight bulbs dim over time and can lose up to 50 feet of visibility before burnout. That's why you shouldn't wait. Upgrade your drive with brighter lights for better visibility on the road ahead. Sylvania's step-by-step installation video guides make it easier than ever to take control of your nighttime clarity, all without a trip to the mechanic. So before a burnout darkens your day, upgrade to Sylvania and see better tonight.
Are you ready to get spicy?
These Doritos Golden Sriracha aren't that spicy.
Maybe it's time to turn up the heat.
Or turn it down. It's time for something that's not too spicy. Try Doritos Golden Sriracha.
Spicy.
But not too spicy.